So you always look at the back area in relationship to 7 o'clock and to 5 o'clock, which would be the testicles and ovaries area at roughly at 5 o'clock here. And in this area, you deal with the uterus or the prostate for the man. Now you find a lot of men who have prostate problems will have a subluxated third lumbar vertebrae, which shuts off the nerve supply to that particular area. And to correct that prostate problem, where a person is up 4 or 5 times during the night, present company accepted, of course, but there are some people up 4 or 5 times during the night, and here's where we'll have to dissolve the calcification on that third lumbar vertebrae, and that comes popping up into place, into position. We'll have to correct the tailbone where the injury originally originated, and that comes back up into place, and we're in good shape. Now, there's so much we could talk about here, but let's go on, Doug. You're on, sir.
Again, we've got a number of the nerve rings here. We've got some of the angles coming in right in this area right here, which we could look at.
What do you do with the angle now, Doug?
Wherever you have like a couple of nerve rings like this that are more or less kind of coming together, you work in that area and you look on the 0-degree reflex and you look in that whole area to see what's going on there.
Do you all understand that you put that particular area definitely on a must area for that for your body electronics flow sheet? I'm sure you've all seen that. You work with it. You know what to do with it. But that's what you have to put on.
Okay, next slide. Okay, again, we've got, like, for example, an angle right in that area that we could deal with where we've got a couple nerve rings coming together. Looks like you've got a few nerve rings right out and through that area that are beginning and ending. Another bit of an angle right in through here. Anything? Next slide.
Let's get into radii solaris on a very deep level now from this point on.
Okay, the radii solaris are these spoke lines right here. And first of all, as we mentioned yesterday, these are going to show a condition of lowered electrical potential in the tissues, which we can think of as a host condition for parasites. You don't actually see a parasite in the eye for the simple reason that it's not part of your body, so there's no neurological connection. But what you can see is the host condition. Now, you'll find with your radii solaris that the more severe of a situation you have, what you're going to find is the radii solaris is going to be darker and longer. And as this will start to heal up over time, what you're going to find is that the radii solaris is going to get lighter in color, and it's going to get shorter from the inside out. Now, Brooke, for example, has had a lot of radii solaris in the past, and he's been watching his for quite some time where they've been getting gradually shorter. Have you had some that have disappeared completely? Okay. From the outside in. Oh, did I say from inside out? From outside in. Sorry about that. The radii solaris are going to disappear from, thank you, Anita, they're going to disappear from the outside in this direction.
Yeah, about 5 or 6 years ago, I had quite a lot of radii solaris where they'd start from the edge of the pupil and virtually go right out to the edge of the limbus, and almost all the way around the eye. So I'm working on that, especially the last couple of years. I've noticed that some of them have disappeared, and a lot of them have shrunk right back in as they're getting closer to the pupil, like from the outside in, as Doug suggested. So it takes a little while.
Now, about 8 years ago, Maggie had a radii solaris in the kidney adrenal area in one of her eyes, and she actually had the radii solaris completely disappear in a single point holding session, where it was there before the session and totally gone after the session. So it's not always going to be a gradual disappearance from the outside in. Sometimes you're going to have something just totally go in a matter of an hour or two, perhaps less.
Anita, bless her heart, in Sri Lanka, she had a long radii solaris in the adrenal kidney area on both sides. And when that thing burned out in Sri Lanka, which I mentioned before to you, where it was just unbearable to be in the same room with her, she just radiated heat all over the place, and her kidneys just burned and burned and burned and didn't stop for several hours. When they stopped, the radii solaris was totally gone in her eye.
Yeah, you did a good job of telling that.
Pardon me?
Yeah, there's nothing much more I can say. I mean, he said it all, yes.
Okay, how about all the other radii solaris where you had just this beautiful bunch of them? I've never seen more.
Yeah, I had spokes all over my eye. I mean, this eye is nothing compared to what I had. I mean, all over both eyes. And in my left eye, they're practically all gone. And in the right eye, they've come down, like almost halfway down in. So
halfway down toward the pupil.
Halfway down toward the pupil, and some of them are gone. So, yeah.
There's hope for the lady.
Now, something that John pointed out in New Zealand that I'd actually never heard before, that was very interesting to me. On the one hand, we've always kind of looked at the analogy between a parasite in the physical body and an entity in one's aura, where basically in both cases, neither the parasite nor the entity is really the cause of your problems, but they're both basically symptoms or effects, where, for example, in order to have a parasite, you have to have a lowered electrical potential in the tissues, and in order to have an entity, you have to have a hole in the aura in order to have that. And something that John pointed out, which was kind of exciting to me because it really clicked, was how many of you have ever seen the Curlian photos where you take like your hand and you kind of put your fingers down on the plate and you get that picture, and you know how there's like little gaps or breaks in the outline of the hand and the fingers, and those little gaps or breaks are basically going to show what with respect to your aura. They're going to show the hole. They're going to show the holes in the aura, and visually those little gaps or breaks in the Curlian photo are really pretty much exactly what you're looking at here with the radii solaris. So that was a kind of an exciting little parallel. That was all.
The gentleman responsible for that, his name is Dr. Douglas Dean, and I believe he was at Princeton University 15 years ago.
By the way, back about, I think about 1988 or so, there was a seminar that John was doing down in North Carolina where they were doing the Curlian photos of people's hands, both kind of like before and after type photos, and there were all sorts of people there who would have their have it done before point holding and then redone again, days or weeks later, and you would have all sorts of areas where the holes in the aura had completely disappeared as a result of the point holding, and that was quite exciting to see. Okay, with the radii solaris, one of the things that you want to look at, of course, is where, one of the main things you want to look at is where is it located, because this is going to indicate the area of the body that's going to have the problem. One of the things I would also suggest is a lot of times in a brown eye or a darker eye where you're not necessarily seeing all of the fiber structures and many of the other things, and a lot of times people get kind of confused as to what points to hold. The radii solaris are one of your nicest clues there if you're, for example, trying to decide what endocrine glands to hold. You look and see which ones have radii solaris going through them.
Now, are you ready? Okay, get these notes. Please take a look at this particular red line in the sclera. This is a very unique slide. I don't want to miss this as we pass it by. Do you see that this is totally enclosed here? What we call an enclosure. Okay, take that enclosure and go right down in here. What kind of a color change do we have from here to right here? This is much darker. You've got a black bush right in this area here, and you have heavy mucoprotein right through here. Now you follow in with this direct line from this particular enclosure directly in toward the pupil, and you will see that that encompasses an area which, according to my understanding, looking at irises of the eye for over 45 years, okay, and looking at scleras, whenever I find the enclosure in the iris of the eye, in the sclera of the eye, which is the white of the eye, I will always find a cancerous growth somewhere between here and down toward the center of the pupil, not including the pupil. Not including the pupil. Okay? So I'll just mark that down. Now we'll cover this in sclerology, but I just want to show you a very choice problem area. Okay. Continue on, Doug.
Okay, next slide there, Matthew. Thanks. Okay, again, we've got, of course, we've got a lot of the nerve rings there, but you'll notice in addition, you've got a lot of the radii solaris. In particular, you'll notice up here in the brain area. Can everybody see this pointer? Can you see that from the back? You've got a lot of the radii solaris going up through the brain area. And as I said before, a lot of times where you don't have a lot of obvious iris markings, at least when you're starting out, one of the best clues you can use for point holding is look where you find the radii solaris, because that's going to tell you a lot about the various points to hold in the various areas where you're going to have some of your weaknesses.
Now, where you have your radii solaris, like in this particular iris, you find it roughly from 11 o'clock over here to 1 o'clock, which would, as you take a look at these are actually up in the brain area. Now, if you have that particular set of radii solaris in that area, what I realize is that there's a blood supply and circulation, nerve supply, a reduction to the brain, or else they wouldn't be there. And I find out that that person is definitely suffering from a first cervical vertebrae subluxation. Now, usually the first and second vertebrae need to be adjusted. So it's between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the brain area where the radii solaris are. And this means that we need to adjust the first and second cervical vertebrae. Now, there are some schools of adjustment theory where they adjust only the first cervical vertebrae. Now, we will not be going into that. We'll be going into the full adjustment techniques after, just gentle techniques, after the calcifications are dissolved. Okay? So you won't be hurting the person. Now, let's say you have a huge calcification on the first cervical vertebrae. It's a big calcification up there where these particular radii solaris will be. Now, if you adjust a person using a chiropractic adjustment, you break oftentimes the calcifications in the given area, which creates many hemorrhages in that area. And then it takes a while for that to heal. When it heals, you have added to the calcification mass there, and you've added insult to the injury. Okay, we don't want to do that. And so before any adjustment is ever done on that area, the calcifications have to be reduced in size so that just a simple adjustment will restore the nerve supply and circulation to the brain. You can feel the flush, the ears get red, the flush gets up there, and the person has circulation and nerve supply to their brain for the first time for a long time. The headaches go away at that point of time, and oftentimes along with that will be a reduction in high blood pressure problems. Doug.
Okay, next slide. Okay, again, we've got another situation where we've got a lot of the radii solaris up in the brain area between 11 and 1. You've got a right eye here, and one of the things that we'll probably get into a little bit later in the week is you want to look at an area of the eye that's known as the animation life center, which is going to be right up at 12 o'clock. And this individual would seem to have a radii solaris going straight up and down at 12 o'clock. This is a very, very important part of the iris. If you read in Jensen's book, which is up here on the front desk, you'll get probably a more comprehensive definition of what is meant by the animation life center. But it will have a tremendous amount to do with a person's physical vitality, and it will have a lot to do with the person's, shall we say, emotional stability and overall sort of zest for life. And a lot of times when you have markings in the animation life center, you're dealing with an individual that in the long run is either going to be very, very run down physically and or emotionally, where there's oftentimes a lot of tendencies towards depression and other sorts of things. And this is something that's very, very handy for you to understand as an iridologist, because you're not just trying to deal with a human body here. You're trying to deal with a personality. You're trying to deal with a human mind. A lot of people who have markings in the Animation Life Center are going to have a lot of your manic depressive type tendencies. Now, many people who have had these types of symptoms in the past have gotten to the point where they're not all that aware of them anymore, and they've more or less been kind of shoved under the carpet. What's going to happen when you take somebody with an eye like this and you get on a really, really, really heavy nutritional program? They're going to go through not just physical healing crisis, but what's going to happen? They're going to go through some tremendous mood swings, perhaps, some very serious ups and downs, and possibly suicidal thoughts, severe depression. You have all sorts of things that are possible. It's very, very helpful for the person to have some comprehension of this sort of thing in advance. If you take an individual, for example, that's had back problems in the past, and that individual gets on a heavy program and goes into back problems again, they start to have a lot of aches and pains in the back, and they realize that they haven't done anything to their back recently, it may be fairly easy for that individual to accept that that's a healing crisis. In other words, the back pain that they're going through now, it may be fairly simple for them to simply experience it without identifying with it. But when you have an individual who all of a sudden starts getting suicidal and severely depressed, that's a very, very great challenge for the individual to be able to go through that without getting trapped in it, without identifying with it and getting really stuck in it. Brooke?
Brooke, did you have something?
I know what Doug's talking about here, because I had a really large, really long radii solaris up in the Animation Life Centre some years ago, and getting involved in cleansing the body and doing a whole, just about everything I could do there, didn't really have the support or the understanding of exactly what was going on, when for about a 6-month period of my life, total emotional upheaval, like every day, just mood swings every day, and just, my whole world was upside down, and I was really so confused, I didn't know what was going on there. So it's really important you understand this, because I'm speaking from experience here. It would have been nice to know what was going on and have somebody be able to educate me on that, so it wouldn't have been such a difficult thing. So.
Now you will have in your little pack for your iridology, you all have that. You will have the flare cards of Dr. Bernard Jensen, which we made a little copy of, which goes into these various lines in the brain area and the symptoms that you'll have for both hypo and hyperactivity. Those things, you can study that for a month, just that alone, in conjunction with the radii solaris. So don't lose that and don't misplace that, but don't forget to study it either. That's very, very important when it comes to these particular lines up in this area. But let me tell you this is my finding. These begin to disappear when that first cervical vertebrae is adjusted properly. And that's why adjustments should be accompanied with body electronics in every and all case. Now, the other thing I want to point out is, do you see this particular color around the pupil of the eye, kind of like a rust color, with little tiny rust spots all the way through here, especially up in this area here of the intestinal area? It has been my findings over many, many years now that if you have that particular color with all those rust spots in zone 1 and zone 2, when the person goes through some heavy cleansing in that particular area, you'll have all kinds of cancerous growths, fuzzies, corn, and what have you. And so I just want you to be aware of that. And just mark down the little rust-colored spots in zone 1 and zone 2 is a very definite sign of these corn and fuzzies. Now, it may take quite a little while to clear that out. Now, Anita, can I use you for an example? Anita had these little rust spots, and she's been on the program for how many years? About 10 years. And then suddenly, when she was in India, all of a sudden she dumped out all of this corn and fuzzies, and the rust spots that were there were dissipated nearly entirely. But she just kept passing more corn and more corn and more corn and fuzzies and fuzzies and corn and fuzzies for about a week until those were completely gone. And then her eye went through a marvelous change with the rust spots disappearing. Now that's 10 years on the program, and there hasn't been anybody from a nutritional point of view that has been more faithful than she has. From a resistance point of view, she has had her resistances like any of us have. But the thing is I want to point out that sometimes it's not the food we put into our mouth, but the resistances that we have toward the experiences of life that make all the difference. Present company accepted. We're all here together, aren't we? Okay, Vivian.
Is it just the rust spots that tell you that, John, or is it the rust? I mean, it's all it's all
these little
brown.
Rust spots all the way through here. Yeah.
Just the rust spots.
Just the rust spots. If you have black spots and brown spots, yes, those are the same.
Yeah.
Not just the rust spots, but a lot of people just have this color of rust, and they have it all through their zone 1 and zone 2, and sometimes out into zone 3. That's a very serious condition, but it takes a long time to get that out. And that's oftentimes associated with resistant patterns. Now, I'd like Anita to come up and share with you what she experienced as compared from our first trip to India, where we stayed about a month, and to Sri Lanka, where we stayed about a month, the first trip, and then what happened on the second trip. Now, I'm just asking her to share this with you so that you can understand the mindset that we have and how this changes, and then how the body straightens out. Vivian, continue on.
Can I just ask you one more question? What about the rust itself? What about the brown itself?
That goes.
Yeah, but does that have something to do with it, or is that the enzyme deficiency?
That is all going to be a zone 1, zone 2 ring showing a severe enzyme deficiency.
Yeah,
because when you correct the enzyme deficiency, that all goes away.
Thank you.
Okay, Anita, come up here, please. Lights, please. Lights, please. Open the doors for a moment.
Yeah, and when you're looking at the rust, what I'd like to say is that sometimes you have to look really carefully, because some people will just think it's like a brown color in there, but you have to look really close to see the rust spots. Rust spots. Rust spots. Sorry. Well, I touched on this in the beginning of the class, but I didn't realize the tremendous consciousness change I had until I went to India and Sri Lanka. And because the first time we went, I had such a resistance to everything there. I mean, everything around me was I just was resisting it and resisting and resisting it. It was the streets and the toilets and the flies and the smells, and I mean, it just seemed like one resistance after another last time we went 2 years ago. And this year when I went, I just was embracing everything, and everything, that nothing was, I wasn't resisting anything. I saw the work I had done in those 2 years, and I went back into the same situation, and I saw how everything was just beautiful. And in fact, I even wanted to stay. I didn't even want to leave. Yeah, I could just see all the work I had done working on it. So, yeah, and the beauty of the people, too. We had some very beautiful encounters there. Yeah.
What happened to Anita in India?
At the Taj Mahal?
Now you get sick. Is that what happened to you, Anita? Did you get sick?
Oh, yes. And then I came down. I had this tremendous, I got sick. I had this diarrhea. And for a week, I was passing these corns and fuzzies.
Now, the question I have, was that sickness? Or
Maybe
was that
a
healing crisis?
Probably was a healing crisis.
Now, what happened with our fevers that we had is I put my hand on Anita's forehead, and it would be healing crisis, fever, and I wouldn't believe it. Pardon my skepticism, folks. I'm very slow in some areas. But I wouldn't believe it, and when she took me and would put her hand on my forehead, as I passed tons of fuzzies and corn, for longer than 1 week. That went on for about over a month. And when that happened, I thought to myself, I'm dying. But this was a healing crisis, and it wasn't a sickness.
Yes.
And during that time, there's a tremendous consciousness change for Anita at that time, where she had no resistance at all to all and every circumstance that we encountered in both India, and we went through every we went up and lived way north in Delhi, in the old part of town. Yeah. And as far as Anita was concerned, it was absolutely wonderful. And it's just we had a chance to live there and take a look at all of the aspects of it.
Yes.
A shop in the marketplaces with the dust and whatnot, and it was just absolutely no problem whatsoever. And the same with Sri Lanka. It was absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
Where at one time it was just very difficult to handle the shall I say, the flies and the what I call the disease-ridden gutters full of junk. We didn't have it this time. No problem. The whole place had changed to where it's absolutely beautiful. And I just kind of scratched my head and I said, what's going on here in Sri Lanka for everything to have come from a place of what I would call a corruption to a point of incorruption? It was a beautiful place to be.
Yes, but I've never seen so many corn and fuzzies in my life. I mean, the whole toilet bowl was just full of them. Just full. I just couldn't believe it.
And the rust spots disappeared.
Yeah.
I just want to share that with you. This is a case in point. You need to know that, because when you're working with people, you'll see this a lot of the time, and you think, well, that's just pigmentation spot. No way, folks. That's the real McCoy, and you have to warn the person to stay on the program till they get rid of it. For Anita, it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
But she started out with black-brown eyes.
I'm getting there slowly.
On the rust
Mike?
Gloria?
How you recognize the red spot in the brown eyes?
In
It's there.
In my case, Gloria, I started off with brown eyes, and you couldn't really see all the rust because a lot of it was kind of in underneath the brown. And so I didn't really start to see the rust until I'd been on the program for 4 or 5 months and had gotten rid of most of the brown in the eyes. And I passed just amazing amounts of mostly fuzzies, not really all that much corn, but just absolutely phenomenal amounts of fuzzies. And what I've seen over the years where the rust has stayed in the eye, the brown's pretty well all gone, but there'd still be rust in the center, is that I've intermittently passed fuzzies for 10 years. And sometimes I just think, like, where are they all coming from? I think I'm just still in the manufacturing business, as John likes to say. And I've noticed only recently, after more than 10 years on the program, that I'm finally getting the rust starting to disappear, where I can actually now start to see green inside the autonomic nerve wreath. In other words, where the rust is even stripping away. So it can take quite a while. And as John has pointed out, after a certain point, it doesn't have all that much to do with our nutritional status. It's just our resistances. And if we can finally start to unravel a few of those, that's when we're going to start to see the rust disappear. It's not going to be minerals and enzymes that are going to do it after a certain point.
You assume that every person with the brown eyes probably has the rust spots there?
I don't know. I know I did.
You cannot assume. But I have found that as soon as you get the brown chromatophores, which is like a heavy velvet, and Dr. Jensen describes it as a heavy velvet, once that comes off the anterior surface of the iris of the eye, you get kind of scared when you see what's down underneath it. Okay? And then you double up on the program for the person. Every time the brown has disappeared slowly from the iris of the eye, I find so much more that I can then tell the person, okay, here's what you have to do to work on. And there's no end to it sometimes. Any questions? Brooke, come up here. Where are you, Brooke? Brooke? Where's Brooke? Are you coming right? You coming right? Okay, bring your torch with you. Bring your torch right up here. I'm going to have you take a look at Doug's eye, and we want to see what happened to Doug's eye today.
Does anybody have one of those little mirrors here? Yeah, why don't you bring that up too?
I only called on Brooke because he wasn't here. I know you were. And I know what you're doing in the kitchen too. Okay, take a look at Doug's eye and get on the mic here, and we want a full report. Brooke has examined Doug up on many occasions. His iris of the eye, I should say.
Well, the overall color.
Speak loud, sir.
Sorry, Doug. The overall colour is there's a lot of blue coming in on Doug's eyes.
Can you all hear?
There's more than I noticed.
Speak
before.
loud, Brooke.
There's a lot of blue coming in Doug's eyes, more than I've noticed before. The last sort of three and a half months or so, or about 3 months ago, when I sort of had a look at his photos, there was green. A lot of green, but just like light tinges of blue. But there seems to be a lot more blue, which I noticed earlier on. I had a little quick look earlier on, but so that's the first thing overall. What I did notice too from looking earlier on is that in the heart area and on the left eye with Doug, he's got quite a tight A&W, autonomic nerve wreath, and on the left eye it's always been closer in than on the right side, but this morning it seemed like the right side was a lot further out than what I'd noticed before. So that was one thing I was looking at. Plus the colour within the autonomic nerve wreath, there seems to be, I guess, a bit lighter colour.
How about the rust spots?
There's a lot of white. There's a lot of light colour coming through. Last time I looked, there was more. The rust spots are were pretty uniform, and there's a little. It's getting a little bit lighter in that area.
Okay, that's what normally will happen.
And in the right eyes, it's a lot lighter. There's a lot less rust spots in there as well. And I'm just trying to look back at his photos because
Speak louder, Brooke.
I'm just getting overcome with emotion, and I'm having a bit of trouble holding it together. There seems to be overall a lot more blue coming in and a lot lighter, and the rust colours are getting patchy, if you like.
Okay, you would say he's salvageable.
Probably.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Brooke, very much.
Is, definitely.
Need anything more you want to say?
You might want to use a 15 power loop to see the rust instead of using the 10 power, just to get a little more definition in there.
Now, some of you have a 4 power. That all that does is helps you to see the eye a little bit larger than what it is, but it won't be large enough to get in and see that black sand and the rust spots and their interaction with the pigmentation in the eye. So you need about a 15 power to get the job done. Yes, sir. Bosch and Lomb. Bosch and Lomb. It's an optical supply that you have in every major city.
B-A-U-S-C-H and Lomb, L-O-M-B. L-O-M-B.
Any optical supply place will have the Bosch and Lomb loop. L-U-P-E.
15 power. Yes. Any jewelry, well, the normal power that we use is a 10 power. We use a 10 power.
The Zeiss will have about a 40 power, but it's going to cost you about $6,000. Okay? Okay. Could we have the lights, please? Doug, continue on, sir.
Okay, if we get the slides and the light and the next slide. Okay, basically more of the same. We've got quite a few radii solaris up here in the brain area, some down here in the lower portion. Next slide. Okay, again, quite a number of radii solaris here.
That's ruined by the
Tough to
humidity. Pardon me, folks, but the humidity has just simply ruined my slides. That's all a fungus on there. I didn't know that was that bad. But we're going to have to make a change on that, Doug.
Yeah. Next. Okay, again, more of the same. We've got quite a lot of radii solaris. You'll notice that you've got a variety as far as how long they are and how dark they are. You've got some fairly faint ones, for example, down here that are relatively short. But just basically check it out and see where the radii solaris will be located, what organs and glands and parts of the body are affected.
Now, one thing about the radii solaris, when you start really looking at them and they start disappearing, you'll have 4 symptoms that will come out that will help you to explain this to your patients. Number 1, you'll have all kinds of skin eruptions. And the skin eruptions will be in the area of the radii solaris. Number 2, you'll have cleansing diarrhea. Cleansing diarrhea. A lot of corn, a lot of fuzzies, a lot of diarrhea. And the diarrhea will continue until you've reached a point of healing. Number 3, you'll have all kinds of fevers going on. And these will be healing crisis fevers that you can put your hand on, as you know how to do. Pull your hand away about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch and feel the cold wind on it, which will usually be the case in a healing crisis fever, unless you're into an extreme exothermic reaction where the whole body is radiating heat, and then no problem, just to make sure you watch the person carefully, and because this is everything in reverse order, and they're coming up through terrible death wishes and one thing or another, and ridding the body of all these things, so you have a lot of word patterns with it. And along with this will be the release from the body of a tremendous amount of catarrh. Now, catarrh is your mucoprotein or mucus. The mucus will come from every single cavity of the body. And when that catarrh comes out, it can even come out through the belly button, where sometimes you'll have a little thing that looks like a very small fecalith in there. A little black capsules oftentimes come out of the belly button during this time with infections. It goes clear back to the time when the kid was a baby. Okay? Yes, sir.
I've been mistaken on that then, because I've not understood that the catarrh and the mucoprotein were the same. You're saying they are the same.
The mucoprotein, when that comes out of the body, one small part of mucoprotein, the size of the nail on your little finger, will give you roughly about 2 full cups of mucus when that starts coming out. The mucus is the mucoprotein breaking down into a mucus discharge, which can come out of the eyes, it can come out of the ears, it can come out of the nose, the mouth, the vaginal area, the anus, every single hole in the body it can come out of. Brooke.
I thought that looking at the iris, that the mucoprotein is seen in a lot of the lymphatic system and a lot in the endocrine system as it's coming in. And I thought the catarrh is like sitting over the top of the fibers, just generally anywhere over the eye. And what you see as far as what you see in the iris, but in terms of coming out of the body, I thought that the catarrh would, as you say, would be like a thick piece the size of your thumbnail would come out as mucus or in liquid form, as like a cup, fill a cup or two. But I thought they were placed differently in the body. Like.
No, the same place. Let's explain it now. Can I have the lights on, please? This has to be settled right now. Okay, get this down in your notes. When a child is born and is fed a formulation of soybean material like that comes from Nestle's and a number of other companies, which is literally indigestible because of enzyme deficiencies, there's no enzymes in your formulas for babies. And the babies are given these formulas, and you'll very quickly see a little ring around zone 6 in the iris of the eye of what they call the lymphatic rosary, or the mucoprotein. Now, Brooke, where that forms first is on anterior, and it's what they call like a little string of pearls. They're all anterior to the fibers. Okay? Now they start out as a little wisp, looks like a cloud way up in the sky. And that wisp of cloud is way over on the anterior portion of the iris of the eye. That's where it starts. And then gradually it accumulates into these little round beads that you see on around zone 6. Okay? And then they move, watch me, and then they move toward the back of the eye very, very slowly, where they intermix with the fibers of the eye and move back into in other words, you still have it in the front of the eye, but it accumulates and moves clear into the back of the eye until that whole iris of the eye is full of mucoprotein. The lymphatic rosary is mucoprotein, even when you have that little string of pearls on the outside of the fiber structures. That's mucoprotein. Even when you have the little cloud where it begins is mucoprotein. You with me on this? Okay, now you get the lymphatic enzymes, which are comprised of two things. Your amylytic enzymes to digest your complex carbohydrate, and your proteolytic enzymes to digest your long strings of your polypeptide chains or your protein that hasn't digested properly. Okay? Now that has formed as a conjugate, forming the mucoprotein, which is all clogging up the eye from zone 6, gradually moving all the way down to zone 3 and into zone 1 and 2, where the whole eye can be chock full of mucoprotein. Are you with me on this? Okay. Now, the way it has formed will be diminished in reverse order to how it was formed. And until gradually, what happens, the mucoprotein is digested out of the interstitial spaces and the other parts of the lymphatic system of the body where it is accumulated with the engorgement and the atrophic position of the entire lymphatic system, which shows up from zone 6 into zone 3, which I'm sure Doug covered in the class. Okay, you got that? Okay, and when that stuff starts coming out, it starts dissolving by digestion out of and beneath, way back toward the back of the pigment layer there. All of that stuff is digested slowly out of that until it comes forward, and you see it start moving forward anterior to the fibers and looks like a little cloud over the fibers. And then it just gradually dissipates and disappears and goes away when it's gone. The areas that are left where you still are clogged up in there are where you don't have the nerve supply and circulation yet. And so it hasn't been given a chance for the enzymes to penetrate that area and digest out that accumulated mucoprotein. So the mucoprotein is digested, but what you have is you have a mucus discharge, which is called a catarrh. Now, a catarrhal effect is a mucus discharge from every single orifice of the body. It comes out any way you can. It comes out of the lungs as a wet cough. We talked about that earlier today. When a person heals from emphysema, his lungs are full of mucoprotein. Junk down there. And then you come up through the pneumonias and the high fevers connected with the pneumonias and the bronchial pneumonias and the bronchial conditions, and then finally the flus and so on. And the catarrh keeps coming out. And you have all this junk coming out, little hard pieces that you cough up, the little green stuff that comes up. All of that is mucus on one hand, which comes from the hardened mucoprotein, which dissolves into the liquid form, or the wet coughing, which is the mucus coming out. You got that? So the catarrhal effect is actually the mucoprotein turning from a solid into a liquid and will be expelled from the body during the healing.
So the catarrh itself is the hardened matter.
Yes?
But you're saying the catarrhal effect is where it's loosening up and coming out of the lungs or the ears or whatever.
Or dissolving into a mucus, into a
Okay.
watery stuff that comes out.
Where I thought there was a separation there was what within the lymphatic system, which can be in their lungs and other areas as well, I understand that, or throughout the whole interstitial spaces throughout the whole body, where there was a difference between the mucoprotein being in that area where it has to be digested out by enzyme activity, and the fact that, I mean, what are you saying that through enzyme activity it can work out through into the lungs area, for instance, and turn into a wet mucus and come out that way as well?
Tell me where the lymphatic system does not operate. If you have cells, anywhere
Operates
in the
everywhere.
human body you have lymphatic systems.
It operates everywhere.
Everywhere. That's the sewer system for the body.
Okay.
There's no place in the body that the lymphatic system does not work.
So the difference here is where it's being digested out of the lymphatic system, getting into the blood supply, and getting dumped out that way through the colon and what have you, or and being dissolved out and coming out as catarrhal mucus out through the lungs or ears or eyes or anus or whatever.
There's no difference.
It's the same stuff, but it's coming out. It's being eliminated in a different way or different.
Yes, let's give you an example. If you get on a little trampoline and you jump up and down, Brooke, you get on a trampoline and you jump up and down. You exercise the lymphatic system to force the fluid through the lymphatics, right, into the bloodstream. And you can get real dizzy, and you can have, if you are 30 minutes on a trampoline, 5 minutes is maximum. Okay, but if you're 30 minutes on a trampoline and you keep working those lymphatics, if you've never worked them before, you dump all these toxins into the bloodstream, and you can get deathly ill for 3 or 4 days. The same thing with exercise. If you've got a heavy mucoprotein, you got that. Okay, that's where it's coming out through the lymphatics into the bloodstream. Now, what's your question?
Well, I'm just trying to understand this, because I was under the understanding that the mucoprotein was different in the way that it had to be digested out with enzyme activity through the through being dumped, or through the lymphatic activity and pumping, dumped into the blood supply and coming out down through the intestines that way.
Okay, it has been taught incorrectly that the lymphatic system pulls all that stuff out of the interstitial spaces.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the molecule is so large that it can't go out through the lymphatic system, and it's all blocked off.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay? What you've got to do is digest all of that mucoprotein using saturation of enzymes so it gets into the interstitial spaces, so all that digests. You got that? Yep. Then the smaller particles will move out through the lymphatics, and that cleans out all the interstitial spaces, and you go through a lot of healing crisis during that time. By that, where does that lymphatic material go?
So it can pass straight through the collagen fibers, if you like, straight through into the blood system that way, can it? Or can it pass?
It goes out, straight out through the lymphatics, but it goes where? Where do the lymphatics end?
Oh, they end up up here.
Vena cava.
Yeah.
Okay, right into the venous structure there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now
then that's spread throughout the entire body.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that's after it's usually, hopefully, We've got an active lymphatic system there where that's all cleansed and purified by the time it hits the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm. So can it be dissolved down through into the lung linings and come up through the lungs and be expelled that way as wet mucus?
What do you have in the walls of the lungs?
You had the little sacs.
Little sacs.
The little sacs which
and
end up.
They fill up with all this body junk, which will be partially mucoprotein, soot, dirt, junk, and everything else that's there. And the mucus is there, which is secreted from the walls of the lungs to help get all that stuff cleansed out. Yeah. But it doesn't get cleansed out, so it hardens up in there. And so it's mucus in the lung area. Now, when that starts coming out of there, because the enzymes go throughout the entire body, it clears that stuff out. Then this hardened, dry, hacking cough, showing the irritation of all this junk that has never been cleansed out of the lungs. When that starts coming out, you have all this terrible stuff coming out of the lungs.
Okay, I get it now.
Okay?
It's the same thing, I see.
But the mucus that we're discharging is coming out of what we call hardened mucoprotein, which is the mucus that is really being discharged from the lining of the various organs of the body. See, we have to have a certain amount of mucus. We have to have a certain amount of mucus just to lubricate the tissues. And that's all, and that's mucoprotein. So you have to have a certain amount of mucoprotein. Now, one thing that you'll have, let me talk, Brooke. Hey, get this down in your notes so you've got it. For your mucoprotein problem, have a seat. For your mucoprotein problem, you got strong intention, have a seat. Now, for your mucoprotein problem, you've got to have the thyroid working, okay? Your T4, or what they call thyroxine from the thyroid, must be working. And does anybody know what that combines with as a powerful chelating agent for the entire body? Magnesium. And this is why magnesium is so important from your chlorophyll. Because for a chelating agent which helps to pull all this stuff out of the body, which the mucus is tied in with, all this body junk, you've got to have the magnesium along with the thyroxine from the thyroid. And the thyroxine has to have 17 amino acids. So if you have 2 of the 8 basic amino acids there because you eat a lot of cooked food, you're not going to get your thyroxine thing going because you're not going to have all of the amino acids there because the cooking destroys your what? Come on? Tryptophan and lysine. Okay. Those are destroyed at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly 42, somewhere in there, 42 degrees centigrade. Now that's important. Now to get the other chelating agent going, there is a real powerful chelating package which will help for, hey, Tom, please, have a seat. I don't care. I want you to have a seat and keep quiet because it's disrupting me when people are talking when I'm talking. I just want to make it clear. Okay? Now, it's very important for a chelating package that will fit at the same time. One of them is going to be biotin. One of them is going to be folic acid. A third one is going to be pantothenic acid. And the fourth one is going to be niacin. Okay? Those 4 things. And that is one of the most powerful chelating agents that you have, and they're all going to be your B vitamins. Folic acid, biotin, pantothenic acid, and your niacin. Now, some of you are taking your Enzymes International B complex. It's not going to work for you because you haven't got a heavy-duty dosage of all of the B vitamins necessary for the heavy chelating package that we need for our bodies. And this is why we have to have those 4 things in addition to the balance of B vitamins so that the body will go through this chelating package. What does chelation mean? Does chelation have anything to do with the mucoprotein? Okay, you've got that. When you have a mineral ring, that's the same thing as a cholesterol ring, which is the same thing as a sodium ring. And so you have that stuff all tied in together in the body, and so you have to have everything working together. Now, I'm sure Doug explained to you that if you have that sodium ring or mineral ring or cholesterol ring, then you have to recognize that 12% roughly of the material in the fatty substances in the body, where the fat has not been digested properly, about 12% of that's going to be your cholesterol. Now, how do you get that cholesterol out of the body? The flax oil, which I'm sure Doug talked to you about, along with lecithin, about 1,200 milligrams 3 times a day, along with perhaps along with your lipase to help digest out the emulsified cholesterol throughout the body, which includes the fatty material, which that also helps to digest and turn into an emulsified state. And then it's digested by the lipase. Is this clear? And so your plaque buildup is going to be full of a number of things. That plaque buildup in your system is going to be your heavy metals, which the enzymes and the minerals together help pull out. Then you have to pull out all of your fatty substances out of the walls of the blood vessels. Then what do you have to pull out also? The mucoprotein. Do you have mucus throughout the body? Every part of the body has mucus there. It helps the lubrication of things. But then your mucoprotein builds up in the tissues to such a degree that it's no longer mucus, it's a hardened mucus. And that's your catarrhal condition in the body. And that has to come out. And that has to be pulled out with your protein and your protein digestin, which is your protease, and your carbohydrate digestin, which is your amylase. Any question on this? Yes, sir. Nimrod, right here. Thank you. Then.
So what you're saying is...
Stand up, sir, so everybody can see you. Nimrod, they want to see you too. Well, I want your picture.
So what you're saying is that the hardened, mucus protein is the catarrh.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
There's no difference. Okay? Donna. Okay. Sama.
So I just wanted to clarify an issue on chelation. There was a time I went into the Nutri Center in London, and I've been interested in getting chelated minerals, but I specifically wanted the chelating agent to be amino acids. Now, this biochemist in the Nutri Center was kept trying to insist to me that any other chelating agent was as good as the one using amino acids.
I've had the opportunity of going into the laboratories and with some of the finest chelating people in the world. And they have admitted to me that any type of chelated mineral, any type of chelated protein, or any type of chelation that takes place from the laboratory, it has a certain degree of assimilation. But the assimilation happens the following manner. That chelation has to be broken down entirely because when it's made in the laboratory, it is an alien material to the human body, and so it's broken down in the stomach and through the digestive juices, and then the body has to rechelate it so the body can absorb it properly. And it can only do that in a very small amount. Now you can take people and put them on a chelated materials of all kinds from the laboratory, and they're never going to get well, and you'll never see changes in the iris of the eye. This has been my finding, because it is a false concept that even though these are assimilable in the body, when they are assimilable in the body, they act on the body like a drug, and therefore it shows up in the tissues as a drug by an increased pigmentation accumulation in the tissues of greatest weakness. That's why we stay away from in this work from anything made in the laboratory of a chelated nature. It will not work. The only thing that will work in a chelated form will be that which comes from plants, where it's a natural chelation made by plants, which the body is built and programmed to assimilate. And that is why we have to go back to a natural form of growing things, biodynamically or otherwise, organically, and have all of the highly mineralized soil, which the plants are then able to take those minerals, put that into a chelated form that the body can assimilate immediately and utilize as a food. Doug, I'd like you to talk on that, on your thinking and knowledge on that area.
Well, I've always found from a muscle testing standpoint that you have all your mineral chelates, where you're having your laboratory chelates that you've been talking about. I've always found from a muscle testing standpoint that they're quite useless. They don't test strong on most people. And by contrast, you can take your non-chelated minerals such as the Min Plus, and where they're colloidal or largely colloidal, you'll get a very, very, very good muscle test on them. So it would seem to me that what you're saying would make a lot of sense in that light, because the synthetically chelated minerals, they don't muscle test well, and the non-chelated colloidal types like the Min Plus is just phenomenal. So that makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Any more questions?
To go back to the biotin and the folic acid, etc., John, does one have to take an extra supplement for that then, or what? I mean, there isn't enough in the B complex.
Not from nature's laboratories.
What about the one, the Vita?
The one from VitaFit in New Zealand is very excellent.
That's okay then.
I designed that.
Great.
Okay,
So
and we've been getting good results on that.
So we wouldn't need to take anything else, just that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And even Heather will get a little prickly flush gradually from the niacin. Pardon me? It's right on the bottle, and I've worked that thing out over a long period of time to get the right balance, which helps the majority of people. You take one capsule in the morning, one capsule at noon, and that should be all that you need for body electronics work, because the body electronics in the healing crisis, you use up tremendous amounts of B vitamins.
Can one take them without food, John, or should one have food with them?
Take it with food.
With food?
Yeah.
Supposing one's eating just fruit in the morning, is that
no problem?
No problem.
No problem.
Good. The magnesium, how does one get that? You said it's always seems to be deficient.
Doug, you can handle that one, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
With the magnesium, really the best way to get a lot of magnesium in the system is a lot of chlorophyll. Whether you take it in the form of green drinks or wheatgrass juice, probably one of the best things to do would be to get your fresh wheatgrass juice, or some of the different types of powdered, algae, spirulinas and other things, chlorella. But any of these, things any of these things that are really, really rich in chlorophyll is going to give you a tremendous amount of magnesium, and that's probably the best way to do it. You're going to get some magnesium in other things, like in some of your mineral supplements, your Celtic salt, and other type things. But the chlorophyll is really your a very, very rich source where you're going to get lots and lots of magnesium very easily.
Now, I want to talk to you for a moment on this one. Don't run off. Have a seat. Okay. Now, this is very important to understand. Magnesium is the central element in chlorophyll. Therefore, your chlorophyll is a chelate of magnesium. You're aware of that? Okay, you weren't aware of it. Okay, you are now. Iron is the central element in hemoglobin. Okay? And therefore, hemoglobin is a chelate of iron. It's a hydrolyzed protein that the body has created around iron. And hemoglobin and chlorophyll have the identical structural formulation, except in hemoglobin you have a central element of iron. In chlorophyll you have the central element of magnesium. Got it? Therefore, if you have seen, as Doug has gone through, I'm sure last night with you, that little anemia ring in the eye that you saw, usually in conjunction with the sodium ring and the arcus senilis, that blue ring you see indicating an anemia, how do you correct that? Everyone knows that you're going to have an iron deficiency, and that is going to hinder to some degree the oxygen transport system. What do you do to correct that? You give a person a tremendous amount of magnesium in the form of chlorophyll. And then the body takes the chlorophyll, and you have a biological transmutation into the iron or hemoglobin. Okay, you need to have that information. And so whenever you have that blue anemia ring, you give the person lots of green drinks. Now, Anita, I'm sure, told stories about the people that we worked with in the Cook Islands who are dying because they wouldn't allow themselves, because of the Jehovah's Witnesses belief system, they wouldn't allow themselves to have blood transfusions. All Anita did was talked with the families, had them take excessive amounts of green drinks, and the hematocrit would come right back up, and the doctors couldn't understand it. In Loma Linda University, they had rats, and they took all the blood out, they put chlorophyll in, and the rats lived beautifully, no problem. Okay? Okay, you write it down, and you get that down. But you need to have a lot of chlorophyll if you're iron deficient. And the body takes and converts through biological transmutation the chlorophyll into hemoglobin in the human body. Any questions on this? Yes?
Sorry, I have two little quick questions. Can you really, is it magnesium which is a chelate of chlorophyll, or is it chlorophyll which is a chelate of magnesium?
Chlorophyll is a chelate of magnesium.
Thank you very much.
As hemoglobin is a chelate of iron.
Okay. Now the second question is, if I was working and I ran out of minerals, the first thing on my mind would be to go into a chemist and look for chelated minerals. But using amino acids, should I just forget that?
You can't assimilate it properly.
Thank you.
Regardless of what the assimilation factors are. Now, the assimilation factors are people are not getting well on the chelated minerals. Why? Because it acts on a body like a drug, and then it's suppressed. Okay, it is suppressed into the tissues just like a drug. And this is, they say it's absorbed, but it is absorbed, but it becomes a suppressive agent in the body and creates a condition where the body goes downhill rather than uphill. But it will still work on the body like a drug for a short time. Doug?
Janine?
Doug?
Oh, you're burning? Okay, we'll make an exception. She's burning.
How much of the what? The what?
The liquid chlorophyll, how much to take?
I don't know where the liquid chlorophyll comes from. I got very, very upset with the last liquid chlorophyll that came from Nature's Sunshine because it had all the preservatives in it, and it had chlorophyllin in it, which is made in the laboratory, and the muscle tested weak. I don't know where the liquid chlorophyll comes from Nature's or from Enzymes International. I have no idea. Yes?
Just on the copper chlorophyllin from Nature's Sunshine, that's what I found. It's kind of synergized, if you like, or made in a laboratory. The best one I've found, which is natural chlorophyll, is called Chlorofresh by Nature's Way. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but it's in a brown glass bottle, which is, I'll put it on the board.
What's it from?
It's from plants. It's
what kind of plants?
What's it
I'm
from?
skeptical of everything coming out these days on chlorophyll.
Alfalfa, yeah, it is from alfalfa, yeah.
Are you sure?
Well, I wasn't sure which plant, but Matthew here says it's alfalfa. Can you remember? I can't see the label. Can you?
Have you muscle tested it?
Yep.
How was it?
It's way stronger than.
If it's from alfalfa and it's a natural low temperature processed alfalfa, it might be all right. But a lot of times they run that thing through through a very high, at least 160 degree rotary kiln to dry it out, and kills the enzymes, and therefore it has a long shelf life, but it still might preserve the chlorophyll.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I do know it's way stronger than the Nature Sunshine.
Yeah, you got to understand exactly what you're getting on that. Don't believe the labels you read, and certainly don't believe all the advertising scams. But more often than not, you're going to find out that the advertising scams are simply to make money, but they don't tell you really the details as to how the stuff was manufactured or how it was put together and processed. Usually it's a high temperature process.
Just as I understand the chlorophyllin, it apparently doesn't have magnesium in it at all. It's bound around the copper instead of the magnesium in order to stabilize it. So in spite of the fact that it's synthetic, it hasn't actually got magnesium in it anyway.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm also aware that there's wheatgrass powder out now. I don't know the source of it, but I will have all the information to send up, and probably even a bottle of it so we can muscle test it as well.
Thank you. Jim.
I had a couple of questions. One thing I'm just kind of confused, a couple things I'm kind of confused on, so I just want to make it clear. You said you were talking about chelated minerals, how chelated minerals, laboratory chelated minerals are bad. Can you talk a bit about, in Enzymes International Minerals, they say natural colloidal chelated minerals. Can you explain how that's different than a laboratory chelated mineral?
This colloidal chelated minerals, that came originally from the old gentleman by the name of J. Clark, who, because they came from an old kelp bed, he called them chelated.
So he's assuming that the chelation came from the kelp itself.
That's right, but you got maybe 1 million years old. Okay?
So it's a question.
So therefore, it's inorganic. It's lost its organic status. But it is colloidal. And the colloidal nature of that thing is it did come from a kelp bed, so it's highly mineralized. And it's free because it's in a lens-shaped area where it's mined from, where it is a impervious layer, so it's not contaminated with stuff from above or below, and it's really quite a pure supply of ancient kelp.
So really,
but technically, it is not chelated. It is colloidal. And this is what makes the stuff valuable. Now, the reason it's colloidal is because it is manufactured from the kelp so that it is colloidal. All the rest of the stuff is dumped out on the land, and used as a fertilizer.
Okay, I understand that point.
Yeah.
Another one is, this is just a confusion maybe from me listening in just from the last couple of days, but in the iris of the eye, when we're looking at the mucoprotein ring, the lymphatic ring, that's obviously mucoprotein, and we've talked about that.
Yes.
When you look at a brown color in an eye, what's the coloration, or what's the cause, or what's the pigment there? Is there a name for that particular material and where it resides in the body?
You have you have, first of all, anterior, this velvet covering over a brown eye. Okay. That is the anterior chromatophores. Okay. It is a pigment that has to come off of the anterior portion of the eye before you can see what's under it. When that pigmentation gradually over a period of months comes off, and you start looking under it, then you see the mucoprotein. Okay. Then you see the fibers. Then you see the structures of the eye that you couldn't see before. And then you get worried because then what you're seeing you didn't know was there.
Okay.
Okay?
Is the does the chromatophore have any relation to any particular part of the body? Let me say that. I'm saying that wrong.
Not to my knowledge, because that is your melanin protein complex.
So that would reflect to... I'm thinking of the eye as reflecting all parts of the body, the health of all parts of the body. And I can see how the lymphatic rosary reflects to the limbus system and how it's junked up with mucoproteins. And I'm trying to look at the chromatophores and get a piece of the body that reflects to and tells us what's going on. Am I wrong in thinking about it that way?
That would you're not wrong by thinking that way, but the thing is, I've never thought of the question before, Jim. This is new to me, And it's an original question that had never been posed to me before. I've never considered it. But what I do know is that has to come off so you can see what's going on in the rest of the eye. So I would assume, now I have seen this happen now that I'm looking back and going through my computer here. When I have seen the brown pigmentation in the velvet coloring over the iris, over the anterior portion of the iris of the eye, as that moves out, I see the skin color lightening at the same time. So it's an indication that the melanin protein complex is being affected by the entire body system from the chromatophores over the iris of the eye.
On the one hand, it might be tempting to correlate the melanin or the pigmentation, which you'd have your chromatophores in the iris. It might be tempting to try to correlate that with the crystals within the body, but it would seem to me that you'll have many people whose eye is quite blue, which would indicate a minimum, perhaps not an absence, but a minimum of chromatophores. And yet there's surely going to still be plenty of stimulus response mechanisms and melanin protein complexes in the body. So I don't know if you could really correlate it that way.
I don't know.
I mean, when you look at somebody's eye where it looks like a nice bright blue eye, are there still some chromatophores there?
Chromatophores or melanin protein complex?
In the iris itself, is there any brown pigment? I mean, are there eyes where there are literally...
There may be brown pigment, but by the definition of the chromatophores is that which is anterior to the iris itself.
Right. So there are certainly eyes where there's no chromatophores.
Yes.
Okay. And yet those people, you would assume, would still have plenty of melanin protein complexes within the body.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
Every cell of the body, as long as there's a reactive mechanism that hasn't been mastered yet, every cell of the body is going to have that melanin protein complex there.
Would a person with a blue eye, as opposed to a person with, say, a dark brown eye, would there in general be less melanin protein complexes within the body of a blue-eyed person or not?
Well, it's obvious from skin color that there's less pigmentation. And it's obvious from the iris of the eye that is less pigmentation. But what's the programming of the individual? See? What's the programming? How much free agency has been freed up? What's the fiber level of the person? Is it down at unconsciousness, which means that the whole body is still programmed? Or does the fibers up where you have a certain amount of anterior activity? Yeah, and we're going to have to look at the mucoprotein level. We're going to have to look at the fiber structures. We're going to have to look at the blood vessel structures, which also have a great deal of interplay there. We're going to have to look at the emotional aspects, the endocrine systems, and so on. There's so much to look at that you just can't say you look at one area. You look at 7 different areas to determine exactly what you're dealing with, and even then, it's not clear.
Well, what you've just said has been my understanding over the years, and so in light of that, I think it would be fairly difficult to come up with something that would correlate with what Jim's saying. Because
I don't see how you can. But I would say this, and I believe this would be true, that if that anterior chromatophores come off of the anterior portion of the iris of the eye, that with that there has to be a certain degree of release of the melanin protein complex even at the cellular level. There has to be.
So if I understand right now, from my knowledge, I can't correlate the darkness of the eye exactly with any particular physiological entity, to use the word.
I would say if you were to do it, what I'm feeling here, but I don't know that.
Yeah.
What I'm feeling isn't always accurate, but but we have to scientifically look at this. I would say that we're looking at the cellular level, basically.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that gets into my next question. I don't know if I'll ask this right, but when you said cellular level, I'm thinking of 2 different things. One is cellular waste product, the acid waste products from the metabolic processes in a cell, and the other is the actual mucoprotein, the undigested food that hasn't necessarily made it into this cell.
2 separate and distinct things.
That's part of my question.
Yeah.
Thanks for answering that. The other part is, if they're 2 separate and distinct things, I've always been taught that you get rid of the mucoprotein with concentrated enzymes and minerals, the alkaline detoxifying agent.
Mucoprotein
Mucoprotein.
is taken care of with the protease and amylase. The acid cellular wastes are taken care of by the alkaline agent, which is composed of your minerals and enzymes.
Okay, that explains
You're
a
what
lot
they
to
call
me.
the alkaline detoxifying agent, which comes from the enzymes and the minerals. And that neutralizes the acid cellular wastes which come from within the metabolic process of the cell itself.
But if you take the concentrated enzymes, you're going to get the effect of taking the lymphatic junk out of there, mucoproteins.
You
too.
say the concentrated enzymes, which can be equivalent to the lymphatic enzymes.
Yeah, sorry.
But
Yeah,
that's the name
exactly.
of this now.
Lymphatic enzymes.
And that is your amylase and that is your protease together, and that digests out to your mucoprotein. I wanted to add one thing here too, Jim, and I'm glad you reminded me of that. I wanted to express this morning, and I didn't. We got into other things. But what happens is that when I first discovered the mucoprotein and everything else was going away in the eye, but the mucoprotein wasn't, right about 1980. I figured, what do we do to get rid of the mucoprotein? I went to work on it and studied it and found out it was a combination of undigested protein and undigested amylase. And this is when we went through the enzymes, the National Enzyme Company, to Dr. Howell. And he developed for us this tremendous concentrated protease and concentrated amylase to digest out the mucoprotein, which is entirely different from that which is used as what they call the food enzymes. So what we call the concentrated enzymes or the lymphatic enzymes from Enzymes International is the same as the heavy-duty concentrated amylase and the heavy-duty concentrated protease, which is used in particular for handling this concentrated mucoprotein in the body, where the digestive enzymes simply won't do it. It didn't before when I used them. But it took me about 6 weeks to 2 months. In fact, the very first one, the lymphatic rosary that I saw, and I put the person on the amylase and protease, which are very heavy, which were experimental, given to me by Dr. Howell. It took about 6 weeks for that lymphatic rosary to go away entirely in the person's eye. And I was so elated. I was so excited I couldn't contain myself for weeks. And then I went back and said, and we kept going back and getting a stronger and stronger dosage because we knew we were on the right path, until we came out with what we call the concentrated enzymes that you are aware of, which we now call the lymphatic enzymes.
Just for clarification, last point, this is kind of beating a dead horse, but in my mind I think of the interstitial fluids containing both the acid and metabolic waste products from the cells and also undigested mucoprotein.
That's correct, sir.
So what I'm thinking is by taking minerals and lymphatic enzymes together, I'm going after everything in that whole region. Is that generally correct?
Not necessarily, because see, your concentrated enzymes or your heavy-duty, shall we say, proteolytic enzymes, I'm thinking of 12X, which is I don't think they use that in any of the literature, but the real heavy-duty concentrated enzymes or lymphatic enzymes that we use for the mucoprotein is not the same simple little enzymes that we would use for the alkaline detoxifying agent, which helps to neutralize the acid cellular waste of the cells. Two different things.
So do the enzymes for the alkaline detoxifying agent come from the food enzymes?
That's the digestive enzymes. You just use that as what they call the food enzymes.
So should you take those on an empty stomach in addition to taking them with foods too?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
For digestion, take the food enzymes. That's what it's designed for, is for digestion. The concentrated enzymes is really a powerful thing. And what we call the lymphatic enzymes is very, very powerful.
But take the food enzymes also in between meals to work with the minerals to form an alkaline detoxifying agent.
And you get wonderful results with it for that purpose.
Okay. More than the lymphatic enzymes for that purpose? Just for that specific purpose, I mean. I haven't been doing it.
You've asked me a question here that Dr. Howell made it very clear to me through Tony Collier of the National Enzyme Company. All the communication went through Tony because Dr. Howell was in his laboratory and he was protected like I wish I was sometimes. But I could probably never get through to Hal because Tony was such a good communicator for me, and he gave me exactly what I needed from Dr. Howell. Okay, the communication was clear and precise and never got garbled. Now, Tony was very good with that. Dr. Howell told me, and because he was the enzyme expert, I never questioned it. He said, don't use the lymphatic enzymes for the digestion. The lymphatic enzymes, he told me, which was the concentrated enzymes at that time, is specifically for the mucoprotein. He said, you continue to take the food enzymes because that is specifically designed for digestion. Now, frankly, I don't have the mind of Dr. Howell. I don't know why that is true. I simply believed him without questioning him, and I found out you get better results by taking the food enzymes as separate and distinct from the lymphatic enzymes to get the results. Now that's what I have found. Now whether it's because there's more enzymes there and you're very quickly correcting long-standing enzyme deficiencies, or whether they have a different action on the body, I can't answer that to you, Jim. Okay, now I'm going to ask Doug to talk about it from his point of view.
That was just my question, so I'll sit down and I'll listen to your answer.
I've seen a lot of people over the years who simply read the outside of the bottle and say, oh, well, they both have protease and they both have such and such. And so I've seen a lot of people that have just kind of gone in the assumption, and especially back when, as Jim will remember, the names used to be concentrated food enzymes and food enzymes. So, of course, most people would just assume it was the same thing, only more powerful. I've done a little bit of experimentation myself with it, and to me, as John has suggested, it doesn't really seem like it does as good of a job on the digestion. I mean, I've tried, meals just with just with lymphatic enzymes and no food enzymes, and to me, it doesn't seem like it produces the same result in the body. Why that is, I don't really know. But I've also gone the opposite direction and tried taking lots of food enzymes or isolated protease and amylase and that sort of thing between meals and try to see how that effect compared on the body with the effect of the lymphatic enzymes. And again, it doesn't seem like you get the same effect as far as like things draining out the nose and just the general type of cleansing that you get. So whatever the scientific basis may or may not be there, like John says, we don't know what Dr. Howell exactly had in mind. From a practical level, I don't know, I've experienced a pretty obvious difference between the different kinds, and I'm certainly willing to take Dr. Howell's word for it.
I'd like to have Anita tell you what happened to Graham.
Oh, he took he took 9 of each enzyme 3 times a day, I believe. And he had all this mucus coming out of his nose. I mean, he just was blowing his nose like every 2 minutes. And he was at work, and I don't know why his boss didn't send him away, but he didn't, and he just kept blowing his nose and blowing his nose and blowing his nose. He just
the kind of guy you want to have working in a laboratory.
I know.
Dripping into everything.
Oh, yes, and his eye color went from brown to green very markedly, because I didn't see him over about, I think it was about a 4-month period, and when I saw him the next time, boy, did I notice it. It was really green, yeah.
9 each 3 times a day.
I want to first of all say this to all of you. I really do appreciate your questions, because when you have the spirit of inquiry like this with these real deep questions, we're really, I feel in here we're really starting to understand, because you're not asking simple questions anymore. You're asking very deep, penetrating questions. This means that we're getting to understand what's going on to some degree.
Right, just going back to Jim's first question way back then about the melanin protein complex and the chromatophores. With melanin protein complexes, you've actually got a variety of melanins, complexes. There's not just the one, and I wonder whether the one that appears in the chromatophores and reflexes to the skin colour is not necessarily the same one that's in the cells, which is affecting, our crystal crunching, and so therefore there's not that direct reflexing.
If you read very carefully Joseph Deck's book, he'll show you several different formulations of the pigmentation which we see in the iris of the eye. They're all different. And I don't have the foggiest idea as to what each one of them means. This is for somebody who's going to do their work, say, 50 years downstream. And it's going to take a lot of work to find out which melanin protein complex, of which there are an infinite variety of them, has to do with which particular reactive mechanism that we have in our cell structures. But they're still all, everything in the way the pigmentation from gold to brown to red to black, all of these are still melanin pigmentation, which is a hormone that's secreted from the pituitary gland. But nobody knows what it's made of, except the formulation is there, the chemical breakdown is there, but they still don't understand it. Joseph Deck has it in his book, The Formulations. You can take a look at those. Good observation.
I think if we were lucky enough to ever get the body clean enough, the eye would be violet. I think if we ever got to the highest standard of cleansing the body, the eye would be violet. It would reflect violet.
If Elizabeth Taylor, who is a free soul to begin with, of course her eye color changed to gray, but it's sure violet to begin with, wasn't it?
I don't know.
If we could ever get to the state of loving that much, I think our eyes would be violet.
Yeah.
In this stage of development, where my eyes were just chock full of black holes to start with, I'm very, very content to have blue eyes.
Yeah.
But there is an easier way. From the Body Electronics Accessories catalog, in keeping with the spirit of assume the virtue if you have it not, we have the Violet Perfect DNA contact lenses.
Does that mean we won't be inviolated?
Perfect straight fiber structure, perfect autonomic nerve wreath, all the rest, you name it.
The mucoprotein is laid down because of lack of digestion, improper digestion.
The proteins and the carbohydrates are not being fully digested.
It seems that the food enzymes would then have a better effect on it.
That is correct in part. But the mucoprotein is also laid down due to an absence or very, very low output of thyroxine from the thyroid. So when the thyroid is not working properly and you have thyroid problems, you will have mucoprotein build up to your heart's content, as well as cholesterol buildup in the artery, in the walls of the arteries.
But that would be due from lack of digestion too, wouldn't it?
It sure would.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically it'll go back to assimilation and digestion of our food.
Good.
I think everything goes back to that.
What I would like to say about the wheatgrass, I think there's a point missed here where you're hydrating things and taking the water off. One of the most important things we need is organic liquid, which you get in the fruits and vegetables. But once we start hydrating them, taking them off, there's certainly a thing's either alive or it's dead. And once you take the blood from away, which is the organic liquid, if the food is organic, and our bodies certainly need a certain amount of that liquid. So what John says in fresh and raw, that covers that. But I think we're overlooking a lot of the dried products. The liquid is no longer there. And nature laid it down, designed that our bodies do need the liquid. Organic means, from the Latin, to be alive. And once you take the liquid out of it, it's not alive. The minerals are certainly useful and the other things, but you're missing the life force.
Back to the thyroid for a second. If you consider the role of the thyroid and the thyroid not working properly and that being a contributing factor to the mucoprotein buildup as well as the cholesterol buildup, as John has suggested, consider also that the thyroid's up at level 3, the level of anger, and when we start to look at the eyes here, you're very, very, very rarely going to find a person, when you look out in zone 7 at the scurf rim, you're almost never going to find a person who's up as high as level 3. In other words, virtually everybody's going to be level 6 or 7. Maybe after a few years of hard work, you might make it up to level 5 or level 4 if you're really lucky. But basically everyone here is going to be below the level of the thyroid, meaning that virtually everybody is going to have problems and most likely an underactivity in the thyroid. So in that sense, we're really pretty well all prone to mucoprotein buildup and cholesterol.
Let's think for a moment. How many of you are aware of what they call vortex water? Vortex water, where if you spin the water in a certain direction in a vortex, it becomes live. Okay, have you ever looked at the northern hemisphere and you look at the plants and how they grow in a vortex? They grow, I believe it's counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. Is that correct? Is it the other way around? Okay, depending on where I'm looking from. I'm looking at the ivy twining around the area. I do know that in certain areas in the northern hemisphere, like in Hawaii, we'd go out and do a little bit of a hunt out there around the various areas, and you find the vortex where the vortex is going opposite, and anything that grows in that area is dead. Literally, it just won't grow because the vortex is different. But if you consider the vortex on a tree, you always see the trunk of the tree, and it always has that vortex, that spin, all one direction. And the ivy always goes up the tree a certain way, in the southern hemisphere, for example. Okay, if that's true, then all of the liquids of that particular plant, as it moves from the roots, so to speak, up through the pathways, the blood vessels of the plant, the blood of the plant, it's all going to be going through a vortex. And if you interrupt that vortex in any way, or the blood of the plant, or the juice of the plant, or the fruit, or the juice of the fruit of the vine, so to speak, or the fruit of the herb, then you're going to disrupt to some degree that life-giving material. So if this vortex concept is true, which I believe it is, Keith, did you want to say something? Come up here if you want to say something, please. But if that is true about this vortex concept, then, by golly, don't interfere with the juices of the fruits and the veggies. That's something to, and we go right back to fresh and raw. The fruit of the herb is to be used as meat for man, the leaf thereof for medicine. Keith.
What do you want me to say?
What do you want to say?
Do
you want to say something?
Oh, I've been looking into vortexes a bit. Okay. But, oh, got to drink it, do I? Eat it. Well, there seems to be a few things about vortexes. I was looking into it as far as oxygen.
Real clear and loud.
I was looking into it in light of trying to get oxygen into the water, and understand when you create a vortex, the water is actually, you get a negative pressure suction or whatever at the bottom of the vortex. It actually sucks the oxygen into the water, so you can hyperoxygenate the water that way and draw life into it. But I've been just recently working with a fellow from America that studied Walter Russell's work and also William Baumgartner's work. No, sorry. what's the fella from Norway or somewhere? Walter Schauberger. Yeah, Schauberger's work. And I've done a bit of work with him. I helped him build a vortex machine for aerating sewage ponds, which is about 1,000 times more effective than the systems they use now. And I've been thinking about this, and I was thinking about how to make small ones for actually energising and aerating the water. And this fellow actually wants to teach me this, but I had to come up here, and hopefully when I get back.
Keep his address, will you?
Yeah. Anyway, I've got the equipment to do it, and I've got the intent to do it, and my partner's also very keen to do it, and we're going to have a go at it. I've been thinking about quite a bit here about integrating a vortex machine, which is quite simple to make, and also what they call twister tubes, where you actually have the water twisting down a long tube, and you're getting a vortex that way, and you can get, according to this fellow William Baumgartner, he says you can get, you develop all sorts of energy fields and that by making different tubes, and you can get about 5 different vortexes in the same tube to get different effects. I better not go into that because you can have multiple vortexes in the same tube, and you can have vortexes coming from different directions, and you can get all sorts of psychic effects and things like that. But this fellow William Baumgartner from America, who studied Walter Russell's work in it, he said his gift is to actually make machines. He studied how the universe works, and his bent as an engineer is to make mechanical devices to utilise these energies for the benefit of the world, rather than using, like all the energy systems we use now, work on the explosive or techniques where they actually destroy. They degenerate matter. They destroy. They're a destructive cycle. The destructive half of you've got the one part of the vortex cycle is regenerating, implosive, that's right. You've got the explosive, and he works on the explosive implosive technologies which actually work with nature. And he's got a whole sorts of different machines and things which worked out.
And you have access to these?
Yeah, well, I've been helping him build a prototype for his sewage plants. I actually built a big 2-metre vortex, or what do you call it, thing. Can't quite explain. It was like a what do you call it, a cone. It's just a big cone like this. Anyway, you spin a Tesla turbine at the bottom, which draws, you actually get 2 vortexes. You get one vortex going down the outside, and you get another vortex on the inside. So you get 2 vortexes, perfectly smooth vortexes. And he, since I've helped him quite a bit, he's wants to keep working with me, because he thinks we might be able to do it, because he's had a lot of people he's worked with in America, and they don't seem to get anywhere. He's actually a fellow who made the I don't know if you know about the egg-shaped mineral water thing that William what's his name Schauberger made for making mineral water. This fellow William Baumgartner was the actual fellow who was making them in America and selling them. But when he stopped making them, no one else took it up. So, which I find is unbelievable. But there's one fella, hardly anyone seems to be interested. Anyway, that's a little bit of it.
Jim Geither, would you get together with Keith here and talk to him at length? Keith knows what he's doing on this one area. This might be something very valuable to look into and of great service to humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm very keen. I've been thinking about this thing for years. I've had a bit of experience in biodynamics and mixing of 500 and that sort of thing. And it's sort of quite amazing to actually bump into people who are, coming up with different things that might actually be able to help. Because I make machinery now, but I figure that once you've learned how to make machinery, you can make any sort of machinery, but it's not necessarily, advancing anything particularly. This is a technology that could, revolutionise a lot of things. You can make desalination plants that can desalinate. I can't remember the amount, but it's thousands of gallons of water an hour. Very simply, not a lot of energy, output. And there's just all sorts of things for pollution. What do you call it? Taking pollution out of materials. You can take pure water out of polluted materials just by taking off in the vortex. You can actually have you can actually draw out a certain part of a vortex and you get pure water. There's just all sorts of things. It's just endless. Yeah. That's probably all I've got to say now. I've had to sort of think about this. I had to sort of drop a lot out of my mind because, one thing at a time.
Thank you very much, sir.
I think anything that will aid the life force is tremendous. But as John keeps saying, everything is divine order. And nature gives it in divine order. And we shouldn't move too far away from that. Because the answers are definitely not with man.
All set, Sakara? Oh, John had mentioned before the break at one point when we were talking about the radii solaris, the importance of getting the vertebrae in, and the use of the adjustments in conjunction with the body electronics. And I just wanted to mention that right at the beginning of the break there, John gave me a good whack on the back there and got me in real good. He'd gotten the neck at lunchtime, and he got my thoracics in, and in particular, it's been pretty typically kind of hard to get my upper thoracics and lower thoracics in. The ones in the middle are pretty simple, but the other ones we don't seem to be able to get most of the time. And I got at least a good 20-minute burn there throughout the entire break. I mean, I just stayed on the mat the whole time, just burning up and down the spine there. So definitely don't underestimate the importance of a good adjustment.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that you're restoring the nerve supply is coming back into that area and everything's opening up, so you can get all the burning in through there.
Go into deep detail on it. Now this happened, okay?
Well, the burning that you're going to get into the body is going to be the fire of the Kundalini. You're also dealing with your endothermic and then your exothermic reactions, where the burning is going to be your exothermic reaction. In order for any of these things to happen, you've got to have the proper function of the endocrine system, because the glands are going to secrete the hormones that are going to then be the catalyst for these transmutations. And in order for these sorts of things to happen, you've got an awful lot of factors that all have to be simultaneous. You got to have the nerve supply in the body. You got to have the circulation in the body. You got to have the endocrine function in the body. You got to have the proper spinal alignment in the body. You've got to have proper cranial, structure and function. There's all these different things that you have to get into place in order to really get the burning. I've seen situations where people were getting some degree of burning in the body, but it would be blocked at a certain point. And then simply by doing an adjustment on them, like the neck or the back, all of a sudden they'd get the burning would spread, and it would be able to get into areas that it wasn't getting into before. And for me today, with getting the full back, and it really allowed a lot of the burning to get into the chest, where I'd been getting a pretty fair amount of heat and pain and everything for the last 4 or 5 days, but not really the full intense burning. And so by opening that up, it really just allowed a lot of stuff to get in there that wasn't quite getting through. No matter how much you do on the mental level, and no matter how many emotions you go through, you still got to deal with your horse. You still got to deal with the physical body.
That's what I want you to repeat now, so we understand that.
No matter how much emotional stuff you uncover or excavate, or I guess we could say no matter how much we have dug out emotionally, you can go through all your resistances there. Nobody got that one? Jeez, you guys are slow. All right, never mind. No matter how much of the emotional stuff we go through, and no matter how much of the dualities that we encompass on the mental body level, you can't ignore the physical body. And if your spine's out of alignment, it's going to be very, very difficult to get the burning throughout the entire body, no matter how much else you do. And sometimes a good adjustment is exactly the thing that's going to push you to the next level where you'll get all that burning in there. So don't neglect the importance of the physical, I guess.
Is that clear? Where's Allison? Got that down in your notes, kiddo? Very important. And because oftentimes there have been many, many people who have been hurt by adjustments when the adjustments were made without dissolving the calcifications first, and you're actually traumatizing the person by breaking those calcifications. But once those calcifications have been dissolved with body electronics, and you have a good adjustment and you can put those vertebrae back in, there's no way you can hurt the person. But what you do is you open up, as Doug has mentioned, you open up those nerve supplies so the circulation can get in, and then you have good healing crisis at the cellular level. Any questions on that? Okay, now this next question is going to be a very important question. I'll let Doug answer it.
I was told before with the lymphatic enzymes that you needed to drink a lot of water, and if you started to smell like the odor of urine, you weren't drinking enough. And I wanted to know if there were any other of our supplements that we needed to drink a lot of water with.
My question is here, did you ever find it when you drank a lot of water that changed things?
The number of times they end up running to the restroom.
You still smell like urine.
I haven't had that happen to me. Others have. When they started drinking more water, it did change.
Okay, what would happen then if they start drinking more water?
It was washing the system out. That's why they were told to drink more water.
Okay, but washing the system out, where does that smell of urine come from? What you're actually smelling is the smell of ammonia. Where is that coming from? Pardon?
The pores.
Where's it coming from? If you have a lot of lymphatic enzymes, just look at it. Okay, Brooke?
When you're taking a lot of lymphatic enzymes, what you're doing is, because you've got your protease and you've got your amylase enzymes there within your lymphatic enzyme, what that's going to do is digest out the carbohydrates, or the amylase will, and that'll digest out to what? What does carbohydrates digest out as? Simple sugars.
Your complex carbohydrate break down into simple carbohydrates, which is your sugars. Continue on, sir.
That's quite often what happens when people take a lot of lymphatic enzymes, like I've been known to do, where you take them at night, maybe 20 or 30 at a time, and quite often you go, well, sometimes more, but I did half a bottle once. That was 100, but you know, you'll find you'll get up in the middle of the night and go to the toilet, because several times quite often. Because what's happening is you're digesting out large amounts of this carbohydrate or complex carbohydrates, as John is saying, into simple carbohydrates or simple sugars, whereby the pancreas, if it's not functioning too well, can't balance the sugar level out in the blood, so it excretes it back down to the through the kidneys and to be excreted out in your urine. And so that's one part of it.
Let's talk about that more clearly. When you have your concentrated amylase digesting out the complex carbohydrate, you bring that down into sugar, that raises the blood sugar in the person. Now, when that blood sugar raises, one of the sure signs for a diabetic condition with a very, very high blood sugar is the smell of ammonia. You got that down? The smell of ammonia. If a person is on the table, and you're holding points on them, oftentimes they're going to go into a high blood sugar for one cause or another, And that smell of ammonia that they get is a sign of high blood sugar. And if it gets too high, what do you go into? A diabetic coma. Now that you need to know. It might happen once or twice in your lifetime. When it happens, you're in trouble. And if they're in a diabetic coma, what do they have to have? A little bit of insulin to bring their blood sugar back down. Because in many cases, when you have people who are borderline diabetics, if you have people who are borderline diabetics or diabetics, they're going to have the smell of urine if they have too much sugar in their system from taking too much of your lymphatic enzymes just before you go to bed. Okay? Now that is if you're hypoglycemic, where you have your ups and downs emotionally and so on. And that is one sure sign you're going to have. Now, what happens to you if you are hypoglycemic and you have a low blood sugar? What do you then have? What's the smell?
Like a sour apple.
It's like a red delicious or a golden delicious apple. It's a ketone smell, and it's a kind of a sweet smell really, but it's that ketone smell. And this is low blood sugar, and if you have your low blood sugar going too far, what do you get? You get into a hypoglycemia coma. And this is a low blood sugar coma, and here's where the person will need something very quickly to bring up their blood sugar, and it's nice to have a little orange juice on hand, or sometimes just a spoonful of honey, but by that time, if they're going into a ketone reaction or a low blood sugar reaction, sometimes they're so drowsy that they can't even think at that time to take a spoonful of honey or even a glassful of orange juice, and you have to kind of really work with them to get the orange juice down and get a little sugar back in their system to raise the blood sugar that they're working on. So pay close attention to the odors that you get. If you get an ammonia odor, high blood sugar. And you should know enough about the person ahead of time if they're hypoglycemic or diabetic. And especially if they're taking up to 30 capsules or so on of enzymes. And then if they're low blood sugar and they're hypoglycemic and they go into a low blood sugar, always watch for that sweet apple, kind of a sweet apple smell, which is a ketone smell. It's just like a delicious apple. It's just a juicy, delicious apple. It smells just like that, and that's your ketone smell. Okay, Donna, does this help?
Well, it's part of the question. Now I've got another question.
All right.
Then I'll finish the other question. Okay, so if we need sugar for someone that has low blood sugar. What type of natural form of insulin do we have that we can give to the person that's going into a diabetic coma?
And one of the best forms of insulin would come from Jerusalem artichokes. It's a natural insulin that'll help you. Now, basically, they should have insulin on hand if they're diabetic, and there should be somebody there who knows how to administer it to be on the safe side.
If they're borderline, they wouldn't have it.
If they're borderline, oftentimes don't worry that much about it but if they go into a coma, you better be ready to do something. Mm-hmm. And that is where it gets a little scary because I've had that happen twice. And I remember very well what happened. Go ahead. Oh, they pass out. And then what do? You bring them back to life again. I mean, bring them back to where they're conscious again. Don't let them go out on you.
How would you give them something like a Jerusalem artichoke if they're already out in the coma? I mean, wouldn't you have to have something you could just kind of spread on the lips or something?
With great difficulty. That's all I can tell you.
Any particular part of the artichoke?
The bulb.
Okay, and the other question was I'd asked you about water in conjunction with the lymphatic enzymes, and if there was any other supplement that we needed to be more aware of that with?
I've no knowledge of that, and I'm not sure that water is the answer. I'm sure water is always the answer. On one hand, we should always flush our bodies out and drink lots of water because that helps us to handle the secretions. But I'm not so sure it helps the blood sugar problem. Okay, Brooke?
Just also with your lymphatic enzymes, what your protease, your concentrated protease there is going to digest out your proteins, and as an added benefit there, that's going to break them down into the amino acids, which is, so you're going to get extra supply of amino acids there. I'm not sure how much or to what degree, but I do know that's the way it works. But if you're like me, you'll still keep hung of you very close to your grain fields.
There are a lot of diabetics, so presumably we're going to come across this, John. Are the lymphatic enzymes the only problem? And if so, what would be a safe amount of lymphatic enzymes to tell them to take?
For a diabetic, start out slow and then gradually work up and see what reaction they get. Most of the time there'll be no reaction, in which we've had no reaction in the Cook Islands. I can't recall of one person in the Cook Islands where we've had a negative reaction. We have 25,000 patients. Okay? But there's the odd one that you run across and you'll have a reaction. Be ready for that one. Okay?
I was just going to say one diabetic that I've worked with in a cranial situation where when you plug in that you don't really know how long you're going to be there. You might be there for 8 or 10 hours. Might only be a couple hours, but you don't really know. And he was a little bit concerned about this because of he's an insulin-dependent diabetic, and so he was trying to sort of make a choice as to how to approach it. And he felt like if he ate a lot before the cranial, that he ran the danger of his blood sugar going up quite a bit, meaning that somebody would have to inject him somewhere along the line.
And if he didn't eat,
if he didn't eat, he was going to have to get something to eat, which is hard to do with a cranial. And in other words, you got a finger in your mouth, so it's hard to eat. And what he ended up, and also the other thing he was concerned about was that if he ate a fair amount and the blood sugar went up, and he was probably also going to end up having to get up to urinate quite a few times, which again is an interruption to the cranial. So there's a lot of little factors that you got to work with sometimes in a point holding situation. Not necessarily all life-threatening. Some simply just inconvenient.
No problem. Stand up in the chair there, Doug, if you would. Okay, where does a diabetic usually inject the insulin? Oftentimes right in the thigh, don't they? Not all the time, but oftentimes right in the thigh. Now, what's going to happen when you hold the STO of a diabetic? Does the nerve supply and circulation come back into that numb thigh area? You bet it does. Now, what happens to all the insulin that's stored into the cells there that's never been really dissipated out? That's pumped out. Now, what happens then with all that insulin as it's pumped out into the system? What happens to the blood sugar? It goes down, and it goes down in a big hurry. And that's one thing. If you have a diabetic and you hold points on them, always make sure you have a little bit of extra sugar water, or that you might say sugar water destroys the immune system and all that. But that's going to help them bring them out real quick of a hypoglycemic reaction. But remember that about diabetes, because they not all of the insulin that they pump into their system is utilized by the body. You got to remember that. All these things are little important things that you just file away and you might use once or twice in a lifetime. But very important when it happens. Sama. And you teach this, by the way, to all of your students, because this is an important little step that might save a life.
I'm just wondering whether as a precautionary measure, one could, first of all, measure the blood level, say with a lipstick of the diabetic, and make sure that it's probably in a fairly good range before you actually plug on and go on the table.
What happens to the blood sugar of a diabetic?
It drops down.
In 5 minutes, the whole blood sugar level can change. So even though you measure and you know where they are, that doesn't mean that blood sugar is going to stabilize there.
What I'm saying, for example, if before a diabetic came in and had decided to probably take his insulin, and then his blood sugar level is about 5. Are you not safer with a blood sugar level of about 10 than the one which is about 5?
Pardon me?
Now, if you're going to pluck on the diabetic, and then I'm wondering, if his blood sugar level is 5, you know it's quite low.
Yep.
But now, if changes happen, for example, the insulin becomes dispersed and then it starts using up the blood sugar.
Yep.
What I'm wondering is, initially, I would think probably I'm safer if the blood sugar level was, say, 10 and not 5. That's my thinking, that by the time the insulin disperses and then starts using up the sugar, it will still he may still be within a good range.
When that insulin starts using up the sugar, it's going to go right off the bottom.
Okay.
Because there's so much insulin in the tissues. And when that stuff starts going out into the bloodstream, no matter how you try to balance the person up ahead of time, it's not going to be enough.
Okay. Now, my second question is about the ammonia smell with the mucoprotein breakdown. I was thinking that the urea comes really from the protein.
Say that?
The urea comes from the amino acid part of the mucoprotein and not the carbohydrate part.
Not necessarily. You're talking about a high blood sugar reaction here. And there's a complicated chemical procedure that we're not going to go through here, but it's the result of a high blood sugar.
Okay.
It's not just you might say the protein is causing it. The extra protein is causing it by the breakdown of the protein, which is probably partially true.
Yeah.
But why is it happening that way?
Okay, thank you.
It's still a high blood sugar reaction.
Yeah, I just want to make a mention about the diabetic changing. And whatever you do when they change so fast you can't believe it. And there is a sign that you start noticing, that is if your finger is not in the mouth, if you're not doing a cranial. They start being incoherent from the very stage.
Spacey. Very spacey.
Yeah, and if you are observant, I mean, say like you're conversing and suddenly either they're forgetting something, the sign is very, very slight but definite. You definitely see it, and as soon as you see it, don't even think that don't even maybe anything. You take action immediately. Otherwise, before you blink an eye, they're gone. So it's really very scary if you've come in contact with one. And again, Doc, I was wondering, before a person gets to the stage of a cranial, wouldn't they have already balanced so much that the chances of any of the fluctuations in the blood sugar would have been, or the pancreas would have come up?
I've seen people that have even gone through a cranial and they still haven't balanced it. They're still on the insulin and still haven't had changes. So I think there's probably a tremendous number of factors here that will be involved. Twice in one day.
Okay, calm down. I just wanted to tell Alex.
Want to pull that right up in front? There we go. Closer.
I just wanted to tell an experience that I had when I was giving a massage to somebody that is diabetic, and that suddenly she was sweating profusely. I mean, not just sweating, it was wet. Everything got wet around her, and she immediately said, "Gloria, go upstairs, give me orange juice with lots of sugar." And that was my one experience, but it was kind of scary.
Ready?
Okay, why don't we get the slides and the lights in the door and that sort of stuff? Okay, next. Okay, again, we've got some of the radii solaris right in this area. What number are we at right there, Matthew?
This individual right here, take a look at all the radii solaris in the darkness around the colon area. As soon as this person got on the program, they pumped out tons and tons and tons of parasites. And just a whole bunch of squirming worms. Now, if you haven't seen that, when you see it, you have a very good respect for these heavy, heavy darkness around the colon area and the radii solaris, especially in that area. Just want to mention that. But this is what the eye looks like before they dump tons and tons of these parasites right out in the stool.
Okay, next one. Okay, again, quite a lot of radii solaris. Notice in particular you've got a lot going up into... Notice in particular that you've got quite a few going up into the brain area here. You've also got a pretty good dark one right down in this area. This is going to be a left eye, so you might want to consider either the adrenal or the prostate area down here. And, of course, you got a lot, as we said, up in the brain area. Next slide. We got anything on that one? Prostate, or either prostate or adrenal down in that area. Kidney or adrenal. Alrighty, that's just that's a cataract right there. Okay, next slide. Is that the no iris one, or is that just a cataract? That's another cataract there. And another cataract. Is that? Yeah, this is a slide John got of a guy with a woman born with no iris, or virtually no iris. I guess no iris. I think that's just a rim there.
She can see perfectly well, but she has to use dark glasses because she has no way to accommodate light.
Next slide. Well, you can certainly work to hold points for virtually anything. This here will be an operation with anything with the eyes. One of the things you're certainly going to want to work on is going to be the cervicals to get the nerve supply there. That's a good place to start, anyways. I mean, once you've gone through the endocrine system, that's just a surgery where part of the iris has been removed. Next slide. Okay. Okay, there we got a little bit of a cataract right there. That will be a very, very serious problem right in that area, because what do we see in the color of that pigment spot? Very, very dark. We got a black spot right in that area. Okay, next slide. Okay, another cataract there. Next slide. This would be a surgery where we've got an implant there, and you can see a wire and some little, I guess, screws or whatever that would be attaching things. You all see the wire there. Okay, next slide. Another surgery where part of the iris has been lopped off right up there.
On this particular eye right here, I had one of my students came up to me and came over and said, "Oh, I got the worst case of cancer of the brain you ever saw in your life." And they never saw a surgery before for a cataract. Now, the older people, you'll see this in the older people, but you won't see it so much in the younger people, where the cataract operations are now a little bit more sophisticated.
When you have a large piece of the iris missing like that, does that reflex to the area of the body?
That's a very, very, very good question. Now, Ken, I don't know the answer to that, but there are some people who believe that if you treat the iris of the eye, there is a reflex action from the iris of the eye to the corresponding body part. But as far as I know, it has never been proven to be therapeutic, even though the reflex action is there. So I would have to say, in view of that, even though the reflex action may be affected, the therapeutic action may not.
Donna? The question is regarding the flatness of the pupil there.
That has nothing to do with the pupil flatness that you have on your handout. That has everything to do with the distortion of the pupil because of the operation.
Next slide. That's the no iris again, I guess, and the cataract in that one. Yep. Okay, next slide. Okay, another operation up there. Next slide. And another little operation. You can see a little bit out over there, and looks like another little bit way over there.
Stop right there for a minute. Doug, would you point out that translucent lens right there at 3 o'clock around the iris? Okay, you see that white translucent lens? See it? Do you all see that? Okay, now mark this down in your notes, that when you see that, you're going to have a problem in some way with calcium metabolism. And it will usually be thyroid related. Now, you oftentimes see that in cases of osteoporosis, where you have a honeycomb effect and a weakening of the bone structures. And when the person has their thyroid, parathyroid area worked on, we find that that particular area, that translucent lens, disappears. But you'll find that whenever the thyroid and parathyroid are going to be affected, which is indicated by that translucent lens, that you're always going to have a calcium metabolism problem of one type or another.
Okay, next slide. Question on that last one, Donna?
Come up here, please.
Well, basically, what is this? And I'll get the stick.
That is the lens, which is probably a piece of plastic.
Next slide. Now, is that another surgery? Is that just how it was? Is that just congenital, or?
This gentleman had his eye damaged, and something happened within the iris itself, and the muscle structure, which is the sphincter muscle around and under the ciliary frill, somehow was damaged, and that way it's held in that continual state as you see it.
Oh, actually, that reminds me of something. Do you remember that woman down in Adelaide that had she'd gone into shock when she was younger, and her whole iris had she'd gone into a state of shock, and it's like her iris had sort of turned inside out, and so the whole structure was still kind of distorted, all the fibers. Did you ever see that?
I don't remember.
Oh, it was really bizarre to look at.
There's a lot of bizarre eyeballs.
Yeah. Alrighty, next slide. Okay, another surgery there. Next slide. Another surgery right up there. Of course, we got our stomach ulcers as well here.
No way. That's all surgery, Doug.
That's all surgery right there,
That's
too?
all surgery.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
Chop this one to pieces.
Chopped them to bits.
That's
okay.
all surgery.
All right, thank you. Next slide. And another.
This is the queen in Bismarck, North Dakota. She makes all of the cookies and all of the cakes and all of that sort of beautiful things that nobody else knows how to do for all of the weddings, and she is the queen of German pastry. And is she ever a good pastry cook, so to speak? Now, she has a doctor, and she had a small cataract in both eyes. So this doctor convinced, he said, I have to finish my new home. Would you like to come in for a cataract operation? And this cataract operation left her totally blind, as you can see in this particular eye. And he had the audacity to tell her, well, I'm very sorry that you're blind in this eye, but would you like to come in for the cataract operation on the other eye? I haven't finished my home yet. And I thought to myself, how much audacity can a person have? But that's what happened. They had her scheduling for 17 different operations, one right after another over a period of time, and this gal helped him build his house. But this one left her totally blind with this one. But she's still willing to go in and have the other cataract operation just to help him finish his house.
Next slide. We got another surgery right up in this area. Next slide. And another one of your implants right here with the little screws and the surgery up in that area. and up in that area.
Just so you recognize these.
Next slide. Okay, this is, remember what this was called from last night? That's your pterygium. What would it be called if it was coming from this side? Pick a William. What's, on a physical level, what's something you can do for this? Eye wash. Well, the operation, yeah, but the eye wash would be a better solution to begin with.
Now, one thing about the different eye washes that you can use for this, the eye bright formulation and so on, and the pterygium will actually retreat backward in some cases. But some cases also, you'll find that this is hereditary and runs in families. And it's not going to be so easy to get to handle that if it's a hereditary type thing until you can kind of blow out the genetic programming on it.
Okay, next slide. Oh, injury. It's just the shape of the pupil there just because of an injury. Matthew? Cataract. Next slide.
This particular gentleman, after looking very carefully at tens of thousands of eyeballs and taking thousands and thousands of eye slides, I took a look at this particular eye and everything came together for me. Now, I want to go over this with you, and I want you to very carefully take this down in your notes, because this slide was particularly meaningful to me. Watch me carefully, please. Do you see this gray right here, very, very close to the pupil? To here? See it? Now that happens to be the musculature of the stomach. We have found where people have real serious problems, like with cancer, in the musculature of the stomach, it's going to be reflected in this area as you see where the pointer is. You all have that. Now that's just outside of the pupillary ruff, which in this case is quite black. You got that? Okay, the next thing you want to look at, after the musculature of the stomach, you know that Jensen has his particular small intestine area in the chart from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock right through here. Is that correct? And especially on this particular iris, which is the person's right eye. And then if you notice in the Jensen chart, Dr. Jensen also has the duodenum in this area, right here about 8 o'clock. But I showed you a number of slides where the duodenum was all through this whole area in different parts of that small intestine area. And I told you I was going to show you a slide where this was going to bring it all together for you. Please notice that from about the here out to here, and remember those little black pigmentation spots I showed you, that would be roughly from where the tip of my pointer is out to here. I showed you those black areas showing an ulceration that hadn't healed properly, you know, where it's all pigmented. Now this area right through here will be the part of the small intestine. Now evidently this part of the small intestine has not been fully expanded to include all of this yet, which the Jensen chart would say this is another part of the small intestine, but he doesn't name which part. But this would be the duodenal area. Now following on through, if this is the small intestine, notice that it is encompassed by the zone 1 ring, which goes all the way around here. And you see the zone 1 ring here, right through here? You see how the outline of it is there? Got that? Okay, then outside of that, this will be the ascending colon area. And this right here will be a little bit of diverticulitis and so on. But this is the ascending colon. Now, this person had a tremendous problem. He was bothered with terrible, terrible night sweats and absolutely very, very bad breath and stomach distress nearly all the time. After he passed tons and tons of corn and fuzzies, and this all cleared up with the fecal list and so on, he was in perfect health. But the slide was now clear of all this particular pigmentation, meaning that the corn and fuzzies were gone. Under high magnification, if you look in here, you can see just a multitude of tiny little black spots where under a size 4 magnifier, it looks like what we would call gray putty. Is that clear? Okay. Now, this is gray putty, and this is your corn and fuzzies. Now, remember this? What's this area right through here, around here, where you see that kind of a gray putty-like material? That's the stomach musculature. What's this part right in here? The small intestine, but that can go on around. And then what's this around here where I have my around the outline of it? That's a zone 1 ring, and the presence of that shows enzyme deficiencies. Okay? So you have to correct these long-standing deficiencies. And what's this right along in here? That's the lining of the ascending colon, and that we have to go after. Now, question here, Simon.
Yeah, just how long, it looks like this fellow's got a fairly good constitution, so how long did it take you to fix him up?
In his case, 2 weeks. Okay, next question. Okay, you got that? Let's take a quick look at the next slide. Okay, all I want to show you here very quickly is the black sand. And the black sand here will, under the tremendous problems, you got all kinds of things. You got, what do you have right here? Yeah. A little tritium. Next slide. Okay, now in this case, I want to show you this particular slide. Here, you have a little fiber coming across here, and if you notice carefully, it goes all the way across the eye and comes in over in here somewhere. You see that? Okay, I have never found out yet what that means. Next slide. Now, I want you to notice this. This is very important. Do you see this little fiber across here? It goes from here across to here. And here you have a strange little discoloration here. What does that mean? Haven't got the foggiest idea. But what I have found is that as a person goes through healing crisis, which none of us really understand when they're quite complex, I have found that these little lines across here disappear entirely and everything comes back to normal. And so I scratch my head and say, what happened? Now, some people are in that position. Some people don't know what happened, and some people think they know what happened, and some people know what happened. But in this case, I ask, well, what happened? And that there's no way that I can explain that as of yet. Now, Doug, have you ever run across anything that's real to you that will explain that in a realistic manner?
I've not actually seen one except in slides. I haven't seen one in a real person yet.
Okay.
But even so, I don't have the faintest idea what it means. Okay,
all I can say is there could be some sort of embryological development where there's been a little problem with the development of that particular part of the body when the embryo was developing, and there's trauma there. When you go through healing crisis, you go through the trauma, and then everything starts correcting itself. That's all I could say, but I don't know what I'm talking about there. All right? That's pure speculation, and it has nothing to do with reality. Next slide. Okay, right here is another one. See the line here? Comes from here all the way over to here. And what's very important here, supposedly, is a little pigment spot here, right in conjunction where this comes in, but it's just right across here, from autonomic nerve wreath to autonomic nerve wreath. Now, before we had it from pupillary rough to pupillary rough. And here's from autonomic nerve wreath here, right across here, to autonomic nerve wreath. Haven't got the foggiest idea what it means. Okay, next slide. Now here's another one, coming right down here and bending right back up into here. And I haven't any idea what that means. Next slide. And that's so dark I can't see it. But there's a line across there, but it doesn't show up. Next slide. All right. Now here is where you have your black, and it's not quite black, it's almost a reddish color, pupillary rough. surrounded by this area here, which is going to be the lining of the stomach. Now, I have found one thing, that people who take a lot of anti-acid pills full of aluminum will often have this particular line around there. And this has been of interest to me because that absorbs directly into the musculature of the stomach itself. Now, of course, you can see that other ring around here, the zone 1 ring, and the rest of the body, kind of the heavy line out here, the line here for the colon. But here is where you have the stomach musculature right here inside of the zone 1 ring. That's not the small intestine area. Next slide. Okay, what shape size is this? Squaring off, this gentleman had a motor accident in his right thigh. And the right thigh is about twice the size of the left thigh. Hard as a rock, but he won't do anything about this because this is black. What does that black might indicate there? A metabolic breakdown in the tissue with the possibility of a cancer occurring. Next slide. Okay, take a look at this eye, real careful. Take a look here. What do you see right around here in all this gray? Okay, stomach musculature again. You got that? Questions? Okay, next slide. Okay, again, gray putty all the way around here. Next slide. The muscles in the stomach. Not the lining of the stomach, but the muscles of the stomach. Pardon me? Say that again. Well, what do the stomach muscles do? The stomach muscles work on the peristaltic action in the stomach to cause the stomach to go through these spasms, so to speak, or peristaltic action to mix the food in the stomach, and it increases in intensity down toward the pyloric valve, which is where the food enters out of the stomach into the duodenum, or duodenum as you pronounce it here in Aussie.
So does that mean then when we see that gray that we've lost peristaltic action of the stomach?
That means the muscle structures of the stomach are just not functioning properly. Very little nerve supply there, very little circulation there, and oftentimes the digestion just doesn't work. The food lays like a lead ball right in the stomach, and nothing really is difficult for that person to digest his food. It's always distress with this particular eye. The same thing right here. Do you see all this gray putty around here? That's this person has a real problem with his digestion for one hand, but also with the stomach on the other. The stomach is always in distress. Pardon me? Chair where? What for? No, I have no desire for a chair. I've got my crutch. Now, right over here, I want to show you one other thing. Which eye is this? The left eye. This is an extremely important picture. See this right here? This is what they call a leaf lacuna. See this leaf lacuna right here? That shows an enlarged heart, or what they call an athletic heart. We talk about hearts a little bit later on, but this heart is an important one, because whenever you see a leaf lacuna like this, it's usually a very, very large, overly large heart. Enlarged heart is what they call it, and it will have a very slow heartbeat. Now, the person here has to be on a heavy program to clean all this out, and since the body heals, of course, from the inside out, before that heart will heal, you've got to get the digestion straightened out in zone 1 and 2. Is that clear? Next slide. That's just a dark, very dark.
Can we go back to that last slide for a second?
Can we come back one? Thank you. Whoop.
It's an example of probably back 2 slides now.
Back one, the same one. You'll have to hold it and rotate it. There we go.
In looking at this right here, a question that I've had over the years is, if you look at Jensen's chart where he's got the duodenum at roughly a little bit before 8 o'clock in the right eye, does the duodenum ever show up mirror image in the left eye in that
According
area?
to Joseph Deck, yes.
Okay.
And you find that in Joseph Deck's chart here, right here, that would be a duodenum.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next slide. And this is just simply a very dark zone 1 and zone 2, and the fibers are very dark. Much work. Next slide. You have to twist it a bit. And here's again all the what we call the gray putty in this area, showing lots of corn and fuzzies. You can anticipate that just with sureness, and it's going to happen. Next slide. Is that the same one? Yep. And more gray putty. That's all I want to show you. Next slide. More gray putty. And that's all I want to show you. Next slide. Okay. And more gray putty right through here. I just want to show you that until you have it, until you're sick of looking at it. Next slide. And here is an interesting eye, if we can get that in a little more clear. Well, basically, I don't think we can. Look at this right here. Here's an indentation. See this? And you have another indentation way over here going all the way into the pupil and out. And even though this is discolored, you have the indentation here. These areas here we check on our charts, and from that we determine what points we're going to work on. That's bottom line. You get the idea? Any question on that? Next slide. That's it on that tray. Into this one with you. Which eye is this, left or right eye? Hey? It's a right eye. And what time is this going to be right here? Okay, here's a major, at 7 o'clock, here's a very major pancreatic disorder. A person might think he's hypoglycemic, and the person is having manic depressive, up and down, blood sugars up and down, and so on. What color is that? Black. Now, oftentimes the person has a problem, and they just think they're hypoglycemic, when actually you have a very serious problem here in the pancreas, and you had better get that person on a program. Now, it might be 5 years before they develop pancreatic cancer, but pancreatic cancer today is quite common. It's a very common problem, and a lot of people die of it, because most people are hypoglycemic to start with, and then that's about the one step on the way to diabetes. But there's your pancreatic cancer. Next slide. Yes, a little bit. Thank you. Now, I hear a voice. Oh, okay.
If you suspect somebody has pancreatic cancer, because doesn't one have to hold the pancreas point so that the whole body starts working or something?
Absolutely. But you start with the pancreas right off the bat, and then you hit the pineal, pituitary, medulla, thyroid, etc.
And if somebody has pancreatic cancer, you can't harm them by holding the pancreas points then, or what?
Can I have the lights on, please?
Thank you.
Question. Can you hurt a person by holding their pancreas point on their foot if they have pancreatic cancer? What happens if they go through a lot of numbness right off the bat by holding their person's point? Then what happens then to the gonads, or to the, if it's a woman, for example, the ovaries? What happens? They start pumping out the estrogens, And so, therefore, if they have a cancer, it's going to grow far more rapidly because they haven't got the pancreas solved yet. What do you do? What have we talked about all along? If you're going to put a person on a program, what do you have to have then in the diet to help the person to prevent having a fast-growing cancerous condition? Tremendous amount of proteolytic enzymes, papain from the mature green papaya, the papaya leaf tea, etc., etc., etc. You got it now? Okay, but also working on the pancreas to bring that back to where eventually that begins to function normally. You got to be exceedingly careful and educate people, and don't start holding points too quickly on anybody. Any questions now? In fact, all of us, myself included, because I've had terminal cancer at one time, and I had bone cancer about 12 years ago and was given about 6 weeks to live. And the thing is, I still take my pancreatic enzymes regularly. Yes?
You talked about having people with pancreatic problems having fluttering eyes. Can you explain that, please?
Oftentimes when people who have hypoglycemia, they will have forehead temple headaches. Oftentimes, right through the forehead and temple. That'll be very, very common. They'll, after lunch, for example, about 20 minutes to a half an hour after lunch, they get very, very tired and could take a nap if they weren't bothered by coming back to class. Okay? People have where their eyes start going a little shaky. This is another sign of hypoglycemia, or when they start seeing little colors shooting across their eyes. That's another situation. You have many different symptoms of hypoglycemia, but the majority of them is extreme tiredness after a meal. You oftentimes have a little bit of pain right under the rib cage right here, right in this area, which is oftentimes due to a hypoglycemia activity. Okay? Now, I would suggest getting a book on that and just studying up on hypoglycemia, where there might be about 20 different symptoms. Hypoglycemia is a low blood sugar. A hyperglycemia would be a high blood sugar or a diabetic condition. Any other questions, please? Okay. What number are we on, sir? 71. We're just about done with this set here. Let's go on and complete that. May I have the lights, please? Okay. I'd like to point out here, now it's very obvious to me. Now I want to make this very obvious to you. You swing around in a circle like this and tell me what you see that's extremely obvious. What's this right here? Very dark, and this is very light. Okay, is there a color change there? You bet there is. We have a real problem in that area. And this is wherein, if you look here, what kind of an automatic nerve wreath you have right here? A double. And you look very carefully up through here, and you see more of the double autonomic nerve wreath. See that? Got a very serious problem right in this area. Next slide. Okay, on this particular eyeball, if you look very, very carefully, which eye is it, by the way, left or right eye? If this is a left eye, if you look very carefully on it, what stands out here, just right off the bat, as you move around this way? Zone 1 ring. What does that tell you about the enzyme level in the body? Everything is hypoactive. And so basically, to get this person going, put them on the full program. And it's that simple. Now you can peck away at all the little things, but the thing is the entire body isn't working. So the flow sheet, you look down through a few little things here, and you have to emphasize the entire endocrine system to get it going. But you have some very serious difficulties. Now here's another serious difficulty. What time would this be right about here? What time? 6:15 to 6:30. What would this be right here? That's the adrenal, and this would be down into the kidney area. So you have to check very carefully and find out if there are what's called adrenal letdown, which means the person gets very tired about 3 o'clock, maybe 3:30 in the afternoon. They get so tired they can't stay awake. And this adrenal letdown is a very important thing. What? Right through here? Sure, there's problems. Usually those are genetic. Yes. Next slide. Okay, take a look at this. I want to show you this one. Don't forget the indentations. See this one here? And right in here, here's two areas, one going up this way, one going up this way. Those are two major areas that you might want to look at. What time would this one be, roughly? 12:30 in that area. So you take out the flare cards of Dr. Jensen, look up there and find out what kind of reaction you might be having. What about this right over here? What's happening in that area? Hey?
Color change.
This is color change outside of the autonomic nerve wreath. It's not a color change inside. What does that tell you about the fiber level here? Very, very dark. And so this whole area in here, we have to simply put that down on our list of things we have to work at. But right here, if the body heals from the inside out, then we have to work on this part in here, which would be the descending colon, and get that cleared away, and then the fiber structures will move out into this area. A lot of problems down in here. Next slide. Okay, we looked at this one once before. We'll go past this and hit the next slide. This is a duodenal ulcer. Next slide. Okay, on this particular eye, please take a good close look. Where is the autonomic nerve wreath? All over. Goes all the way out here, all the way out in here, all the way out through here, and it's all over the place. What does this person probably have? Very, very slow bowels, and sometimes they probably don't work very well at all. We've had people like this where they have a normal bowel movement at least once every 7 days. And some people have been told by their medical doctors this is perfectly normal. Nonsense. Okay, next slide. Please forgive me for putting these. We've had a tremendous amount of increase of this particular mold. I'll have to change my whole program on the slides because those will have to be omitted. But right here, what's this? You see this translucent lens? When you see this particular thing right here, and you can see a little bit over here again, this is what I want to show you here. You will definitely have a problem with the thyroid and the parathyroid, and you'll have calcium metabolism problems of one type or another. Next slide. Okay? What happens when you have a great big black spot right here or here? No hesitation. What do you put the person on? Full program. Don't make an issue out of it, just a full program. And then after a while, after about 2 weeks, that little black bush will start nubbing off, and about a month, for 3 weeks to a month, will start turning brown. And then I wouldn't say that you're safe yet, but you're out of the woods and you're on your way to healing. Next slide. Let's look at the autonomic nerve wreath. See this clear out here? Now we'd say that that's a closed lesion, but that's also an indication that there's a lack of nerve supply in the area that you find it. And what we have found, is we'll get into that tomorrow and the next day, is that here, these areas here actually open up from the outside portion of the iris, open up, and this closed lesion eventually goes away completely, and the genetic weakness is completely dispelled. You all get that? Okay, next slide. Now right in here, see all this part right here? Now look, this is the autonomic nerve wreath here. See that? And you got a double one right here. See that? And then it goes all the way down in here. Now here's the autonomic nerve wreath clear out through here. And then it comes in here and in here. And then parts of it go clear into an indentation all the way into the pupil here. All of these are parts of a frayed autonomic nerve wreath, indicating that you have a breakdown in what we would call the autonomic nervous system. Now, this shows you right here on every single closed lesion, from a functional point of view, not a structural point of view, you see this and this and this and this. That tells you that there's no nerve supply of any value going out into that portion of the iris of the eye, and you have a lot of correction that needs to be done. Any question there? Okay, this tells you which areas of the body we need to work on with body electronics. And you might find something that's not on that flow sheet because that flow sheet is absolutely basic, and you might find that you have to hit one specific area that would meet the person's symptoms, and you'd work on that, and you might have to even go to an acupuncture book to find out what would be appropriate for that one problem. Because all of the acupuncture points also, from one time in your life to another, one point you will use for one person, which will be applicable to that person, and you'll never use it again. So there's a lot of points that you need to look at as we move through it. Next slide. That's unnecessary. There's 2,000 points there, and you hunt through and find out what would be appropriate for that one person to meet their symptoms. And then when you press on that, it's like pressing on a magic button. It's so painful. Like Doug worked with John Critchley. Are you here? 1 point on the chest, and John's had a lot of work on his heart. Doug found one particular point that was really painful for John, and John got burning for the first time in his life in 2 years. Now that's the type of thinking I want you to have. Be creative. And the thing is you might use a point that I've never seen before, but it'll be a correct point for that person because it hurts so doggone bad. And then find the pain and push, and that's a general rule that we abide by in the body electronics work. Okay, don't be so rigid. You have to follow that scale directly, but don't be so creative that we leave the flow sheet alone. You know, hit a happy medium here. Okay, take a look at this. This is what I want you to see again. See this right here? That's where you have 3 fiber levels. Now, some people will call that, well, that's a honeycomb effect in here. Maybe it is, but the honeycomb effect will still be several different levels of the fiber structures where you have a frayed, like you fray a rope of a frayed autonomic nerve wreath. Next slide. Okay, here's another iris. Bottom line is our problem right up in this area. See that? With the discoloration and so on. We have work to do. Yes?
This is about the honeycomb effect. Is it true that it resembles scar tissue in the area that it is situated on?
What does scar tissue mean?
Build up of cells in one area.
Sure. What happens when you have a lack of circulation and nerve supply in an area? What happens to the collagen in that area? It coagulates together into what appears to be scar tissue. Where your scar tissue basically is the gathering together of all of your collagen, where there's very little nerve supply and very little circulation. Does that help you?
Is that what it resembles then?
Sure.
Yeah?
Sure, there's no nerve supply there. So it would appear like scar tissue there. But it's also no communication because the autonomic nerve wreath is not working. Okay, next slide.